king lines and certain other versions of king lines that came out of both of those. It was like the two brothers that had a big fight. They were going to create a hybrid race together, and then they decided, no, we don't like each other, and we're going to two different lines. This is where you mainly got Major Drac versus Major Anunnaki. When the Olympian gods fell, and the heavy-duty Christian gods, Catholic Byzantine style, came back in, they had some beautiful churches. They made some beautiful things, and people involved on this level were very devout. They didn't know the bigger drama that they were being moved to be a part of. Most of them didn't. Once in a while you'd have an overlord incarnated just to keep track of everybody, put him in a pope position or something, so you keep track of everybody. But it shifted back here. The culture shifted back here into draconian control. And the Knights of Gnosis, which had been the original raider, draconian knights that came in and took over, from the Grail lines, they became the Knights Malta. They're still a very, very strong force. And I was wondering if I let that fall out of my mouth before I really thought if I should do that here. Yeah, the sovereign militia of the Pope or something. Yeah. I figure I'll save lots of that detail for once I'm back home in the States and writing books. Because we're in Greece, and I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want the walls to have ears, and if they did, I wouldn't want to upset them. Yes. All right, I'll let you do that part. Yeah, I'd rather you do that part. That when I'm done, you can do that part.
We're not just referring to the relationships between the god and men, but the physical evidence of their presence remains to be observed in the way that various things like the Van Daniken kind of popularized way of only and the other guy who Sumerian history, what's he called?
Sumerian history?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
the ones who write about what it could only be seen by ET because these geometric shapes can only be observable from that space. Well, if you look at Greece and the evolution of Greece historically, you have a whole series of geometric, pre-plan symmetries and numerical relationships between places which are all to do with template grid management. I don't know if people realize that Greece has that history and observable mathematical history.
Here, you can go in this. This is good stuff. He knows more about this than I do. Yeah.
So that if you're kind of thinking, well, we still haven't got any substance now, this God story. I'm going to stop.
Yeah, we can hear you better with this.
I'm just telling you that there is the physical evidence, just sophisticated, the kind of template stuff that we've built around the Pentagon and Washington and that whole kind of grid of assembly in the States. There is one that predates all that modern stuff that exists in the developing Greece. And if you're going to want to go and explore the underground geometries of Greece, because they are, because they reflect the cultural importance, economic importance of Greece as it remains today, so they don't allow that to be popularized and a bit of a secret society working there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's a bunch of information about the geometry of Greece that just ain't public.
Yeah.
And it isn't encouraged. Because it reflects the financial stability of the time.
Yeah, in fact, I'm very reluctant to talk too much or even learn too much about the Knights Malta. And because there's been this long running, these were the Knights of Gnosis, the ones that came in and took over what was real Minoan civilization, which were the Shahali, which were the descendants. They were out of the Shaleon providences. They were an amalgamation of Grail lines, all put together. They were Celtic, Druidic, Greek, Ionian, all kind of mushed up together because it was our hiding place, and we were creating a super race without even trying to, just by keeping our little groups of culture together. And what was interesting is you ended up with two divisions primarily. And there's lots of little fighting in amongst them, so they'd splinter off in this, the two divisions would have 5 over here and 5 over here, but they had one thing in common: this 5 and this 5 didn't like the other 5, right? So they would, work against each other. You had Knights Templar, which are one thing, which are Anunnaki based. These were the ones that actually were doing the mythical schools, the schools of Isis, the schools of Thoth, the stuff coming up from the Egyptian mystical schools. And then you had the Knights Malta, who fragmented into various other things. I mean, right now, if you want to find the generations of these people. These are the people that who started many nice hospitals and many nice charity organizations on our planet right now. If you look into American history, for example, a division of the Knights Malta that kind of went into more mutation than usual were the KKK. Okay? Yeah.
The guy Alan Keyes is a very aggressive, very sharp guy. He's almost lost his journalist career because he observed that a bunch of guys that work operate at high levels in the American government were talking like a bunch of socialists. And he almost ruined his career by observing the truth, which is the Knights Malta tend to be what we would call socialists. Mm-hmm. And they have an agenda which is, on the face of it, very benign and really quite caring, and involves them all occupying positions of huge power in all of these do-gooding organizations.
Yeah.
But they have another agenda behind it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, it's working both ways. You've had, from these times, and it all started in Atlantis, it's all worked up through our god mythologies that we've been given the whole time. We have basically two competing groups. One are the draconian ones that came up through the night, became the Knights Malta, Knights of Gnosis, Knights Malta, that diversified into various different, very old family lines in different European countries and different Middle Eastern countries. Right now what you're watching is a very interesting drama in the Middle East that has to do with some of these lineages that are working here. You also have the Templar Knights who came up in various other things. Right now their main branch is called the Freemasons. Their cover branch on the outside is called the Protestants. Yeah. where you have the Knights Malta. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Where you have in the Catholic tradition, that's like the Knights Malta line has come out. So it's like when you want to take it into politics, it gets really fun too in America because you have basically bipartisan. You have your Democrats and your Republicans. The Democrats are the Anunnaki and the Republicans are the Dracs. When we had the Civil War in America, you had the Yankees were the Anunnakis and the rebels were the Dracs. I mean, it's been there. The people motivating groups of just regular people trying to be people. You have these controlling factions of, first of all, front men. They're the people that the people out here think are the leaders. And then there's the people behind the front men that are actually the ones pulling the strings and trying to make things happen. This has been a progression all through our culture. I mean, when we look at the ancient ruins of there and wonder about what Minoans might have been like, it was like, well, what was there before? The Shahali and a few others had much more advanced civilizations. But the powers that it took, the abilities that it took to build palaces of stone that have, beautiful carvings and those kind of things, most of those things were learned from the people they captured. They were learned from the Grey Line races. We carried the Atlantean knowledge with us and the Lemurian knowledge with us because many of the Atlantean ones were the ones who got exiled from Lemuria because Lemuria went down first. And they brought them over to Atlantis. And then Atlantis went down and they all ended up down here and various other places. So I just wanted for us to be able to touch base with this bigger history and this kind of big drama that we'll learn about as we go through, these workshops, particularly the all day and the ones that are literally all day. I get really intense on this and bounce around the stage and pointing at Mylars and things. Where you see where those things that we'll learn about that seem like out there are very much down here. They're very much about what we're living here and now. We've had so much corruption come in here. The Bible once upon a time was a holy book. It was a piece of the Emerald Covenant, CDD plate translations, the Mahabharata texts. They took it and ran with it and made a story that wasn't even true. They tell us the crucifixion of Christ story. Christ was not crucified. We've gone through this in some of the other workshops. He was not. He ascended. Not because he died first, but because he finished his mission here and he couldn't do anything more in that time frame. And it was time to leave. He knew he ascended through the Ark of the Covenant, which is a portal passage that comes up through Giza, in the Great Pyramid in Giza. And they created a story, and they made Christ a martyr. They took some of his teachings because they knew that they were loved, because he had started to bring the Emerald Covenant teachings back into the civilization at the time. They took the idea of Christ, they took the history of the man named Christ, twisted it up into the history of another man who was one of their hybrids that was supposed to get back on, bring his people back into the Emerald Covenant and didn't. And they created this whole story, this whole Jesus, Mary, and Joseph story that was agreed upon by even the competing groups, be they, whatever, if they were Protestant or Catholic or whatever, it didn't matter. There was one story that was agreed upon. This particular biblical story, what do we do with what happened in the biblical times? Because for them it was a big problem. There was this guy with what they considered a big mouth who went around and he had his memory back and he talked about the Emerald Covenant and he talked about ascension and he talked about stargates and about the Templar and he talked about the times that were going to come when there was going to be a big battle between the fallen angelic races who were going to try to get the planet. These were the things that were in Revelation and stuff originally. They told you the whole story. Now they all coded it. Now it's all encoded to hide pieces of the history, just like the Greek things and the Roman things were coded. The mythologies were all coded. So we're in the middle of an amazing time period here that if we understood how to interpret the history that we see before us, it would verify the things that the guardian races are trying to explain to us now. But it's such a shock to some people because we've been raised to be so dependent on a book that tells us about God instead of the Spirit of God as it moves through us that we're afraid to let go of the props. We get so accustomed to the drama and the fact that we're on a stage that we lost touch with the fact that we're real beings that can be beings and take the costumes off and, go home and maybe have a nice dinner, after the end of the show. We've been on this stage and playing the parts in this drama for many thousands of years now. And it's coming to a head, and it's coming to a head very quickly. Unfortunately, it could have gone nicer than it has. It could have gone more pleasant. The guardian races have been trying very, very hard to, since the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements in 1992, they have been trying to get the Anunnaki races to say, come on, you guys wanted to enter Emerald Covenant before. Your races are not going to benefit from this, from taking them into this path of evolution. Let's, work together. This is what the agreements were supposed to be about. The Pleiadian-Sirian agreements of 1992 were supposed to bring the Anunnaki races and their Leviathan, who are very strong on the planet now, together with the guardian races, and together they would make a stand to prevent the Draconian races from taking over the planetary Templar. And then from that period, the Anunnaki Leviathan races and the human and indigos would create a united humanity and move forward into enlightenment, very slowly bringing back the history records, bringing back the truth. Because one of the things the Anunnaki weren't too thrilled about was the fact that, well, at some point we have to tell them all of the truth. We can't just pretend we were, the gods from ancient Olympia. Nice gods, right? No. We promised them. See, the guardian races made a promise. They made a promise in 246,000 BC when they gave the CDD plates here that when the end time drama came, they would come back and tell the truth. Even if there wasn't a soul left on the planet that wanted to hear it, they'd at least come back and bring it back. Because in case there was, people had a right to know. They didn't have to choose it. We have like the worst recruitment department on the planet. We don't recruit. We're not collecting bodies. We share what we have and what we know with you. We try to explain some very difficult stuff, because it's hard. It's hard to let go of your old gods. I don't care if they were gods you were attached to like Apollo and Zeus, or if they were gods like Jehovah and whoever else you might want to call them. They're still, we've turned to these beings, these ideas of beings, for so long for strength. And it's like, once you realize that there is something bogus about all that, does that mean all of it is bogus? Does that mean there isn't a God? Does that mean there's nobody that hears me when I pray? Does that mean there's nobody that cares when I talk to them? Does that mean I'm stuck here all by myself? Right? There's a lot of us, I think, would feel that. It's like, nobody wants to be stuck here all by yourself. I don't care how tough you are. It's like, if I had to pick between there being no God and having to deal with like Apollo or Jehovah or something, I guess I'd just kind of like toss a coin and figure out whether it was going to be Apollo or Jehovah, because no God was not an option. If it was just like the atheist perspective tries to teach us, where it's just the stuff that's before our face and there's nothing there, and we didn't come from anywhere, and when we die our bodies are gone and so are we, that's just a bunch of nonsense. That's scientific like mind babble. And if you want to really, really have a meaningless existence and feel really frustrated because there's nothing to live for except to perpetuate your own species so you can be as miserable in the next generation as you are in this one, believe the scientific paradigm alone. Because that's what happens. If you take science, Big Bang, poof, all of our molecules came together in a Big Bang once upon a time, and that turned into like planets, and that turned into like the dust of life stuff that became pond scum, and the pond scum like grew flippers, and then the flippers grew feet, and then yeah, that whole story. Like, oh, that's a history for you. That comes down to we have no purpose in being. There was no original design. It was just happenstance. Bang, happened to happen. They don't even like stretch as far as somebody made the bang happen. There's no purpose or design, and there's no promise for what's after when you follow the scientific paradigm alone. And if they were right, because I'm very much a realist. I don't want to know something. I'm not into like tirades of fantasy. I don't have to know there's an inner earth. I don't have to believe there's an inner earth. I don't have to believe there's God worlds, and I don't even have to believe there's a God. If I was really convinced and somebody really showed me that, sorry, there isn't, I'd be mightily disappointed. I would be very, very upset, personally. But I deal with it. Oh, okay. You know, it's kind of like when they found out that the world wasn't flat. It's like many of them were very, very convinced the world is flat. The world is flat. You have to be absolute lunatic you think the world's round, right? And then you find out, the guy comes back. I got a picture. It's round, right? Oh. Oh, okay. You're kind of like, well, so much for attachment to my old dogma. Right? I guess I have to deal with this. If there are things, I wouldn't teach you, I wouldn't want to teach you things that I didn't have a passion about. I have a passion about things that are about freedom and about bring up to the surface in you something that belongs to all of you. It's not something I give you. It's something that God gave you. There is a God, and you're a part of that God. It's the living spark in you that knows better. It knows better. There's a part of each of you that know better, a part of every person that knows better than to grovel and crawl on their knees before some appointed whatever. Because if God loved you, it wouldn't want you to crawl on your knees. If God loved you, God would not want you to grovel. God would not set you up in a mean little world where all it was about was kissing up to God, and whoever kissed up the best would get the promotion. This is what we're taught out here, but there's a part of us that knows better. A part of us knows there is a loving God force, because a part of us has felt that, touched that, been there, and can bring that back. This is what we teach. And it can get pretty challenging at times, very confrontational, because we'll sit there and we'll, some of the things we say that some people that are new to us, oh my God. I mean, the one big one was Christ isn't crucified. You say that in, like, I could probably get stoned to death if I said that in certain contexts. Get out the stones and the tars and feathers, they just probably burn me at the stake or stick my head underwater to see if I was a witch, whether or not I drowned. If I drowned, I'd be fine. That was the old tests. There is a revolution taking place in consciousness on this planet right now. The information goes in waves, and there is the wave that crests high, and then lots of lower ones. Lots of ones, that come down from there. This is the high wave of data. This is the high wave of frequency, the highest curve in the frequencies that are coming down. So it's not going to be the most popular path. Maybe in 500, 2,000 years, it'll be very popular. Oh yeah, there was a time way back when, 2,000 years ago, when there were these people. They were called the Azur somethings. How you spell that? Yeah. Azurtites. Right, like this on the side. Oh no. But they left these foundation teachings, and now we know they're true, and hopefully it won't be one of those, like, messy stories. And yes, they died and were strung up and their heads were cut off and put on posts and all this stuff that it used to be from the old days, because they used to do this to us in the old days. But they won't this time, and there's a reason. It's really kind of funny, because we're not in the middle of the fight. The fight that's taking place is between the Anunnaki and Wysadek agenda people and the Draconian rebellion people who don't want to do what those fallen angelics are doing. We're in the middle of a fallen angelic fight. Now, if we want to take sides and get ourselves in the middle of it, we can get flattened too, but that's not going to help anything. We're here to hold frequency and to help this planet through. It's going to probably get rather hairy, as we say, rather down to the wire and kind of, well, let's put it this way, it may rock. If it rocks, it's okay as long as it doesn't roll. That's kind of what we're moving toward in the next 10 years. Let it rock, okay? Trying not to have it roll. We have a role to play on the planet. The Azarites have a role to play. The angelic humans, and as many of them can wake up, to be a part of it. It's not to get embroiled in the drama. It's not to get stuck in the middle of the drama of everybody fighting over whose God's going to be the best God down here. It's like, let them do that if they need to. But the option that everybody needs is this place needs to be protected. There are certain things that we can help the planetary grids with directly. And we can actually help the others, too. They're making choices. They're making choices to stay in alignment with Phantom. They're making choices of war over peace. And they're making choices of hatred over love. And they're making choices to say, because I call my God Jehovah, or I call my God Apollo, or whoever you call your God, that gives me the right to treat you like crap. It gives me the right to tell you your gods are bad, and therefore I can punish you on behalf of my God. This is the nonsense that's going on. It's like if people could just realize we're all out of the same God, and that God doesn't have one name. It is a one God, but it has many names and no names all at the same time. If they could remember it's the Spirit that lives and breathes through us that is our direct connection to that God, and get rid of their hierarchies of people that stand between you and God, then people could start to find their power, they could start to find their love, and they could start to get along. But there are races that are not ready to do that on this planet, nor are there motivators from behind. So really, what it means to be an Azarite means to be a very powerful spectator. Because we can't stop that drama that's going to take place. They've made their decisions. We were trying. I mean, we were the infinite cosmic negotiators all the way up until the last leg of we talk about it in Voyages, where the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements were broken and the Anunnaki decided no, they were going to fight. And it's like you can't force them not to. Yes, Guardian races could come in with big spaceships and they could do the same, and actually greater. They have stronger technologies. They could do more damage than the negative ones. But that's not going to solve anything. It's not going to fix the problem. And what it will do is hurt a whole lot of innocent people. That's why they haven't come in the first place. What we may see before 2012, we may see an ET battle in the skies. Hopefully not, because if it gets that bad, time to find caves to hide in. I mean, seriously. If it gets that bad, where their identity is let known to the masses, where all of a sudden ETs are verified for real, that's when it's time to really head for country, away from cities, because things are going to change very rapidly at that point. Now, hopefully that point won't come. Neither side really wants it to, because both of the negative sides have a vested interest in being invisible. Once they're known, then mass populations are hard to control. Then everybody's going to go off on their own tangents. What do we do with this? Oh my God, my religion never told me they were real. You know what I mean? So there's a vested interest in keeping the lid on all of it. But what we're going to see is war, progressively moving. We're watching right now the stage being set for an intended World War III drama. It's starting with the Middle East stuff. It's going to get, the next step, little baby step, is going to be when America goes after Iraq. Yeah, we had that. That's even published in the book already. Yeah, I mean, that's nothing new, you know. There's an agenda that we'll talk about more in the Metatron workshop. It has to do with fulfilling an Atlantean script. This was scripted out of how this final conflict drama was supposed to go, way back in Atlantis. The Luciferian Covenant people scripted out how they wanted their version to go, and so did the Draconian ones. And now we get to sit in the middle and watch as it unfolds. This is what the Guardian races were trying to prevent. They've made some headway. We have, for the first time, since 208,216 BC, D12 and higher frequency available on this planet. It's not in critical mass yet, but it can be brought in, and the other fallen angelics can't stop that. That is the one frequency, and the frequencies that can come in higher on the D12 carrier wave. That's the one trump card that can make a huge difference on this planet. And if it can't save the whole planet, it can at least give us the tools we need to do what we need with our biologies, to know what it means to be in safe spaces if it goes really rough here. If it doesn't go rough here, that's good. That would be really, really good. Then we'll just have things we shouldn't have learned for 20 years. We'll know them already. But if it goes to the point where there is going to be some kind of shift, and it is a distinct possibility at this time, and it wasn't before. We didn't even talk about pole shift before. We talked about what we can do, like the Guardian mission had always been, to get us peacefully through the stellar activation cycle. We were never into doom and gloom. We were never into pole shift talk. So when our guys start to talk about preparing us in case, we know they've waited a long time. Others might have jumped the gun in a year before and said, oh, well, just in case, we might as well talk about it. They will wait until, they don't want to even give energy to that probability. But at this point, we are being given teachings on how to build an inner earth Merkaba, which is stronger than the regular type of Merkaba field. It affects your body and your cells directly in a way that they can hold the frequencies where you could literally go through an inner earth gate and be protected if it kind of got crazy in your area. It also gives you the ability to become almost like a walking portal, where your presence in an area may prevent, let's say a tidal wave is coming. This is an extreme example, right? But let's say if a tidal wave was coming, and you had, say you were an indigo and you had maybe 38 strands fully functional and activated, and you had your Merkaba going at that speed, right? Tidal wave goes, right? Watches everything else, and the tidal wave recedes, and what you see standing there is this one indigo. Not even wet. These are the potentials. Now, we're not going to get there instantly. Like right now, if I got hit with a small wave, it would knock me over. All right? But these are the potentials of what the technologies we're progressively learning through the Dance For programs. We weren't supposed to get Dance For programs until beginning in 2006, I believe, or the first part of 2004. Then they're going to give us some more in 2006. They give us time to integrate and work with these. Well, it's all being thrown at us at this point. Here, learn this fast. Work with the codes. Yeah, and actually, it's getting fun now because they're releasing some of the real high symbol codes, the mathematics, and the dancing is part of it. But it's not all of it anymore. They're really focusing on the codes to get the mathematics in there, and then you use the dance to amplify it. Like the salutations, they've shifted from putting our energies into huge round tables, which could have, if we got enough of them done fast enough, could have prevented what's happened, but we didn't get enough of them done fast enough, and the other guys pulled their trump card early. Yeah, we still do round tables, but we're not going for quota at this point. We're not going for have to get X amount done. What it's more like is we're being guided to, all right, it would be useful to have one here or here to help stabilize things. But the focus is on the salutations now and development, the personal spiritual development, which means bio-spiritual development. Personally working to get your field strong so you can get these mathematical codings activated in your body so you can build an Akasha Merkaba in case you need it. And if you can, there will be a time when you get asked, if it gets bad here and you are able to hold that kind of Merkaba field, you will be approached by one of them, not one of us, but one of the guardians, and either telepathically, and if you're not open to that, they may bring you a blueberry muffin in a bottle of water. But at some point, we will be asked to assist others who can hold some of the frequency, but not all of it, but enough to be able to hang out in our fields a while to help them through. So we would be the evac team. Like if it ever got bad and there's going to be pole shift, well, are they going to send an evac team? Yeah, we're looking at it. It's us. Scary thought, isn't it? Like, where's those maps? We're being taught the things that if we need it for that, we will be functional by the time that is needed. Hopefully it won't be needed. And by doing the exercises and running the coding that we're running with the planetary grids, we will hopefully be able to avert some of that. But I'm not going to give people false promises either. For the guardians to be as frank and talk as much as they have been recently about needing to get our fields together to hold Akasha Merkaba now, right? I know something's up. There's something they haven't released yet. It's on security clearance. It'll be released in the Metatronic workshop, I believe. I don't think they're going to do it in Dance For. It'll be the last one. But I'm going to learn it with you. Az is going to learn it with you. It hasn't been told to us yet. But I think it has to do possibly with time projection as far as what they think might happen. So we'll learn it together when that comes through. And I've been like psychically screaming, tell me, please, tell me, please, please, please. I can... It's like there was a saying somebody said on TV that applied really well, and it works for this too. It was in relation to the trade towers going down. The guy said, yeah, that was America's wake-up call. But we rolled over and hit the snooze button and went back to sleep. I mean, I forget who the guy was, but he said it, and it was like perfect. That's exactly what happened there. It was like, oh, everybody's like wide awake. Oh my God, things are happening, and then it totally went away. It's like hitting the snooze button. You were back into dreamland, as if it never happened before. This is our wake-up call, big time. Like, if we can get to the point where things go peaceful on the planet, I don't know how they can, to be honest with you. Because if you look at the warring that's taking place, you have two basic groups of fallen angelics and people that they're motivating that have hated each other for 250 billion years. We've tried for 250 billion years to help them heal, to help them get along with each other, to help them like each other, to help them at least stop killing each other. And they haven't stopped yet. This is the big time that everybody's been waiting for, because the stargates are finally opening again, and everybody's got their little technologies, little microchip technologies embedded into the planetary grids. I can't quite imagine what it would be like if we're going to have the Christos realignment mission, those frequencies come back here. I can't see what the transition is going to look like yet. You won't be able to have the structures that are what we consider the structures of our governments, our social structures. They're all built on an anti-Christos agenda right now. They're built on exploiting masses of people for the benefit of a small few at the top that are pulling strings. The whole structure doesn't fit with the frequencies of the inner earth and the new worlds that are coming. So I know change is coming, but hopefully it will be the bridge zone, as they say. That's the project that the Guardians call it, the bridge zone project, where they're going to link our timeline into the inner earth timeline and give us about 2,000 years of evolution to where we can catch up with ourselves and where we should be at this point in our evolution. But what that's going to look like in the next 10 years, I don't know, other than I may know more by the Metatronic workshop, thank you. I just got a comment, you'll know more by then. But we are moving toward something amazing, something that's unprecedented in the history of this planet in the third seeding. It's like the culmination of what the third seeding has been all about. So you may, some of you are used to me at this point, and used to us, and used to the Guardians. Others basically go, oh my God, this stuff is like totally out there. If there's if you have attachments to any particular religious creed in the whole, but we honor that. We don't tell you can't be in anything. There's people of all religious faiths that participate with the work, and we respect that. What we encourage is find the best that any religion has to offer, any book has to offer. Take that, love it, make it yours, and don't give up the stuff that really works. Just don't give your power away to something that has a name that you don't know who or what it is really. All right? People say, do you surrender your life to Jehovah? I certainly do not. Do you know that Jehovah is part of the Giovanni fallen angelic thing from Phantom Matrix? Why would I want to give my life over to a fallen E.T.? People don't realize. They don't ask for resumes on who these people are. Who's Mother Mary? Oh, she was the virgin that gave birth to Jesus. Jesus was not of virgin birth. I hate to tell you, he was of E.T. birth. And the one they were trying to hide was the Nephilim E.T. birth that was called Jeshua 9, he was born in 7 B.C., where Jesus was born in 12 B.C. All right, so there's a whole lot of things that if I'm ruffling anybody's feathers, any of the new people, I hope I'm not, but I'm very frank and I'm very honest and upfront. I don't pull punches. I don't ever so carefully lead you into the outer circle teachings and then program you till you get to where you can deal with the big stuff. I just throw it all out, and it's free information to anybody who wants to hear it. I won't hold information back from you and give it to you, that kind of thing. And you can love me, hate me, or whatever in between, but don't shoot the messenger. Basically, as and I and Mac are messengers at this point. It's a job we're very grateful for, actually, because we're grateful for the teachings. We are beginning to feel the realities of what it means to have the inner Christos teachings back, because we can feel the changes within ourselves. We can feel the strength that comes from that. And the one big thing that's been lacking here for a long time for this race, dignity. These teachings are meant to give you back your dignity as beings. A dignity that says, no one has the right to stand between me and God. And no God, no real God, It would be so immature that it would expect me to crawl on my knees and grovel. No God would need that. If you were God, just pretend for a moment, if you were God, would you want people to do what they're doing in the name of God right now? Pretend you were Allah. How would you feel about those guys going and blowing themselves up in your name and taking out neighbors on the other side? How would you feel about Christian people who may be very devout, but feel first of all, they have like real sex hang-ups because they're totally afraid of anything that has to do with the body because you've been taught the body's dirty. You've been taught it's sinful and awful, and the only purpose for it is to procreate. Christian people have their own set of hang-ups that the Bible has taught them by twisting things that were true into untruths. Now, we don't promote wanton sex, go and have a ball. No, that's the Anunnaki teaching. So, particularly the Pleiadians, they have a real run on that. If you read any of the Pleiadian channeling material, oh yes, go and love the world, have a ball, enjoy your senses. Now, that's good, except the fact that you swap codes in the bioenergetic field that affect the DNA. So if you go and do that indiscriminately, you're picking up God knows what, and usually it isn't good. There's a balance in how to use all of the sacred gifts that we have. Now, everybody's got hang-ups from the programming, whatever programming we got. Even if it was atheist programming, that just told us none of it was real, so don't believe anything, and you just end up having no faith in anything at all, and life can be a real bummer. At least people that believe in angels have something to feel good about once in a while. Oh, the angels are with me. That feels nice. That does. It does. It's nice to know you have company. So there's a lot of growth that this planet needs to do. It needs to do a lot of it very quickly, and it's going to, even though it's not ready. But it'll get through one way or another. I hope that the teachings we bring to you will help you to set yourselves free and help you to set yourselves free and back home as well. Because there's a feeling that comes when you start to feel the God presence truly open inside of you. All that thing that once in a while you can get. Once in a while you get little glimmers of it, no matter what religion you're in. You get a little glimmer where you feel the presence with you. And that makes people usually dive for the book even more. That's not what it's about. That little glimmer was what managed to get through even though you were stuck in a dogma. That's how powerful that spirit, that's your connection to God is. So if you can work with that, if we can do our jobs well, which I hope we will, we certainly try hard, is to get you back to that place where no matter what goes on in this hologram, you can laugh with joy while having deep, deep compassion for the people who can't do that yet. Even if you're confronted with, say, your own death. Like, oh, heck, I wanted to ascend this time. Shoot, that's going to fall on me, isn't it? Right? Yeah, earthquake, rumbling. Oh, shoot. Nothing to hide under. Where's that Merkaba when I need it? Yeah, come on. Oh, my train. And you're like, time stands still as you're watching the thing start to fall. And you're, can I generate enough frequency to get my Merkaba fast enough so it bounces? And if you haven't been doing it for a long time, you might not be able to. And just remember at that point, oh well, wanted to take the body, just like you kind of want to take that bag when you go on the airplane, but it might not show up at the other side. But you still got to go and do your trip, right? Just remember, oh well, got to let the bag go. I'm going. If you were on a boat and it was sinking, would you worry about taking your suitcase? This is really what it comes down to. If we end up in situations where we might have some earth changes and those kind of things, if you end up with yourself stuck in one of those situations, realize a part of you decided it wasn't worth dragging it through. All right? But realize, okay, I mean, for some of us, I know for me, it's good. This body's so darn tired of all the frequency, because we've been running frequency for so long. Since we were kids, we were doing the DNA activations. And it's kind of like, can we stop yet? No. Even if it comes to the point where you're faced with your mortality, and even if it really takes you out, because it really wanted to bring the body through an ascension this time, you can bring the rest of you through an ascension. That's what's most important. All right? If you find yourself in a situation where death looks imminent, rather than denying that, kind of say, Okay, plan B. How do I? Okay, plan A was get the whole thing out. Okay, what parts can I take? It's like you picking your favorite underwear out of your suitcase before you go. Put on a nice astral body. And the object is to keep yourself entwined within your Merkaba. This is why we'll get good at learning to work with the Merkaba, because your consciousness travels in there, whether or not you have a body to put in it. Okay, it doesn't need the body shell around it. So wherever you are, whichever path you end up taking, these teachings will help you to get where you need to be intact. Like I'd mentioned before early on when I said if a being fragments on their way out, like when you get killed, especially like in sacrifices, how they used to do, where there'd be this trauma imprint. That's what you do when you hit the astral field. You bounce yourself out of body. You're not in the body association anymore. But if you're still in blah mode, you go, meow, like your pieces go flying. Imagine like a big fireworks display in space. That's kind of what happens in the astral realm. And that's not good, because that's where you can get stuff messing with you and getting between the pieces of yourself so you can't get yourself back together. If you're confronted with situations that, even in the physical death experience, keeping your energy together, forming it into a pillar and then into an akasha shape, which we'll talk about more in the Dance for Love program. You will keep your consciousness together and you'll be able to move it. Now, if you're still with your body and you can get your body frequencies up high enough and your DNA activation levels high enough, you will be able to put that capsule right around your whole body and take it with you. All right, so these are some of the things we're talking about. Anyway, I don't know how long I've been talking. I just keep kind of like going and going. Well. Good morning. Yeah, I think we're hooked up. Yes, we are. All right. Okay, I have a question. How many people here were at the Dance for Life workshop? Okay. Okay, so there's still several who weren't. All right, because what I would like to do, I'm putting both of the programs, like Dance for Life and Dance for Love, together for two reasons. One, because I knew there was going to be some people that didn't have Dance for Life at all. And two, because if you were at the Dance for Life workshop, you will know how crazy it was for that workshop, because we got the workshop during the workshop. So as far as being able to cover things in the depth that I would have liked to, it was very, let's say, stressful at the time, trying to get all the material, just get you something so you had a booklet even, because they were giving me the information as we went along. So it won't hurt to do, a recap on the things. I know there's still been a lot of questions for people who have gone to that workshop. like, how many times do you do the Sariyas? Was it this way or this way? And honestly, I have to run through them and go, good question, was it this way or this way? So the Dance for Life program will be fine-tuning itself as we move along. I imagine by the time we get to Dance for Joy, which is the last one, they'll all be very fine-tuned. What we have now is today we're going to do the morning session, we'll do Dance for Life, and then the afternoon session we'll go into Dance for Love. The Dance for Love part is some of the most amazing information that I've seen. I've spent literally since the last workshop in whatever month that is. I don't even know what date it is anymore, because I've been buried in graphs. It was all graphs. So when you get the paperwork this afternoon to go with Dance for Love, it doesn't have the book written around it yet. It has a bunch of very intense graphs that, because you'll hear what they are and you'll learn how to use them through, verbally. Now, and if anybody doesn't have tapes, I think we're taping this, right, Danny? Dan, we're taping?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. We'll get you a complimentary tape, so you'll at least have it on tape. Eventually, these are going to be books with, pages that explain, like, this is this, is this, is this. But right now, they're basically workshop packages. I'm excited about the Dance for Love program because it's getting into what's called the Ekamaps of the God Worlds. And this is a level of data that I didn't even have memory of. I mean, it was off limits. Certain things that we carry in our cellular memory that we know about from other lifetimes when they were common knowledge are on security clearance right now. And until certain things happen on the planet, even if we were masters, and then we won't be able to remember. Because if we remembered, we'd start to bring that information here, and other people could access it when it wasn't time for it to be accessed. The information we're being given in Dance for Love is information that I don't think it was supposed to be released until somewhere between 2008 and 2011. It was the advanced teachings on beginning to really build your Merkaba rapidly and exploring, okay, once you do that, where do you go? Okay? What is this great thing about building Merkaba and activating our DNA and being able to ascend to where? Like, okay, now that we got that far, where are we going? Is there a map? Or is it just somewhere out in the blue toward God? Godward. Well, this gives us an idea of the maps. It also answers a question that I've had for a long time, because I knew there was an answer, but I couldn't access the answer for a long time, and it's frustrated me. You know how we have the Kathara grid with the 12 spheres on it, the tree of life grid. I knew that plugged in to other tree of life grids in very specific ways. And I was saying, how do these guys plug in together? I know there's a way they plug in together. Do they go in sets of 12, or they go in sets of 6, or, what do they do? And I could never get a coherent answer off the CDD plates. And I knew it was there, I just couldn't reach the data yet. Well, the ecomaps of the God worlds will show us how they plug in together, and it's rather extraordinary. You just see these. When they started, right now you'll get them this afternoon for your booklets. They're on 8.5 by 11 paper. That was an accomplishment because they started out table size, where what started out this big grew this big, and that grew this big, and that grew this big, and by the time I was done, I had about 12 sheets, 12 or 13 sheets of 8.5 by 11 taped together to trace the expansions of the Kathara grids and how they nest or cluster together to form what are the templates for what are called the God worlds. The God worlds differ from what we talked about in Dance of Life and what we will talk about today in Dance of Life, which are called the 7 higher and lower heavens. The heavens are the smaller thingies. Now, we're in one little section of one of the lower heavens. The God worlds are way past our 15-dimensional time matrix. Our time matrix is a little tiny place within the God worlds. The God worlds are the places where beings that have eternal life reside, where they're completely beyond death or the experience of death and that kind of thing. Humans used to reside there. In fact, there are many human beings that still do reside there. This has been a part of our history that was robbed from us a very long time ago, and it's being given back now. And I hope that by the end of today's workshops, the two of them put together, that you can share some of the joy and enthusiasm that I felt that's literally kept both Az and I up for ridiculous amounts of time in the last several weeks, trying to prepare these maps to get this information to you. Because this is the real thing. This is the information that begins to show you where it all plugs in together and why we need to build a certain type of Merkaba that will get us through the gates. We already had in some of the other things, the Templar manual gave us the locations of stargates, as far as the planetary stargates and how they plugged into the universal stargates and that kind of thing. So at least we knew how to get to like Sirius B or Andromeda. I mean, at least you could find the site and say, okay, this one links to Andromeda. How do I get there from here? Activate my Merkaba. How do I do that? But now we start to see, and there's a question that was answered in this, that I've been to Inner Earth. I've been there in this lifetime because my experiences with the Guardian Alliance started when actually before I was even did fetal integration, but physical contact with them began when I was about 4, and being taken places by them began when I was about 7. I've been there. I didn't know where there was for a long time, but it was a different place that was very far advanced compared to here, and things were big. It was neat. Like the Guardians were big. They were anywhere from 7 to 12 feet tall, and it made you feel very, very tiny when you were a kid. I mean, it feels short enough as it is. Plants were huge, where fruit, like an orange, would be this size. I mean, the things were huge in this place. And I knew I was there physically. And I especially knew because I get in a lot of trouble when I'd come back and people had missed me. Like when you're 4 and 6 and 7 and you disappear for a number of hours and you can't explain where you were except the place where they have big fruit, you tend to get in a lot of trouble. Yeah. So I carried with me for a long time the knowing that 2 things. One was the knowing that I've been there, and it's a place I want to go, and I can't stand being here. Can I please go back and never bring me back here again? Because I don't like it here because people are nice there, and they're not nice here. As a kid, that's how I felt about it. And the second thing was I knew that my life depended on not saying a word until I was older, until I was a grown-up, and they couldn't do anything to me for sharing what I knew. And the Guardians themselves had asked me to take a vow of silence, a vow of secrecy, until I turned 21, at which time then we would get into the speaker thing, and if I wanted to become a teacher and things, that would be fine. But for my own self-preservation here, I mean, imagine your 6-year-old telling you about the place with the big fruit, and about the big people that come on a regular basis and take you there, right? And about spaceships and a few other little oddities. Usually kids like that, unfortunately, end up on something, be it Thorazine or Prozac or electric shock treatments or something. And I was warned from the time the contact began that it was extremely important that I didn't try to say anything. And just to make sure, it was a very interesting thing that would happen. I had an aunt, my Aunt Kay, and I trusted her, and I knew she would never let any harm come to me. So I had tried to tell her about this place. And the place I learned later was called Inner Earth, and I didn't know it was called that then. And I tried to talk to her, and I remember trying to say it to her, and all of a sudden this frequency ran through. I heard like digital tones inside my ears, and something different came out my mouth than what I was going to say. I was going to say something about, these people come and they get me and and they take me, and I wish you could come too. And something about the frogs in the pond back at Russell Park came out. And I remember sitting in my head going, I didn't say that. Like, uh-oh. And then there's a little tap on the head. Remember you took a vow of silence? Oh, okay. All right. So I know the place is real. When I speak about a place called Inner Earth, it's not a place that I imagine is real. It's not a place that I've just visited in the dream state, though you can visit it in the dream state. It's not a place I've just visited in meditations, though you can visit it in meditation. In fact, what we're going to do, we're going to have, probably this afternoon, we're going to have an exercise in projecting to a mente. Because to get your body somewhere, you've got to get the higher parts there first. Your spiritual bodies, then you need to get your mental body, which is your D3 body, your emotional body, which is your D2 body, and you need to get those there first if you expect to bring your D1 body along for the ride. So the first part of training is learning how to mentally bilocate and to begin bringing yourself into the spaces. We will do a meditation on that. It's not a meditation that's written yet. It'll be taped, and then hopefully we'll pull a transcript off it. But it's going to be a live one. And when they're live, I usually have a lot of help. It's kind of like Ma'a talks to me and it comes out this way. Or sometimes my own higher part. If you ever hear me start speaking in an accent, some of you know this already. Some of you, it may sound very strange too, where I sound like I'm kind of like from Transylvania or something. It's very strange. It reminds you of, I don't know, it's a Slovakian accent. I don't know what it is. It's an Inner Earth accent. There's a part of my higher self that is incarnate in, it's the Ascended Master level of myself. It's called Azara. And sometimes I blend with that level of my own consciousness. And when its energy moves into this body, it picks up its natural language patterning, and it comes out when blended with English, sounding like I'm from Transylvania or something. So if you hear a funny little accent in there around the sides, particularly when we do an mente voyage or something, know that it's me, and it's not channeling, all right? I'm still here. I'm still conscious. It's not some other being coming through me, because we don't endorse channeling because of the obvious dangers of getting yourself possessed and not being able to get back in your body. That's really a problem in this day and age right now because of the politics that are involved. So I just wanted to warn you, which usually means that's going to happen. So before we get into the new stuff that goes with Dance for Love, I would like to begin a bit of a more slow, steady, nice journey through Dance for Life again. Now, it's interesting because I can take the same body of material and it never comes out the same twice, which means every time, I don't give workshops twice very often. It's usually we get the next level of information down, so there's no time to do the one a second time. But there's more information that comes through. I've done it with Kathara, with the Kathara Healing Program, where the first time, Kathara came through, and the second time, other things got woven into it. So there's always more to learn, and sometimes I'm surprised what comes through. It's an interesting place to be in, and anybody that's taking the contact course, where you're going to begin to open up these levels of consciousness in yourself. There's a very interesting translation process that goes on within yourself, where, when you're up here teaching, if you're ever in a position where you're up here teaching, or even talking to someone, you'll be amazed at what you know that you didn't know you knew. where it just kind of like falls out of your head and out your mouth, and you go, oh, yeah, that's good. Like, nobody gave it to you but you. But if you hit a part of your DNA that activated, that wasn't activated before, and it just ran, and if you happen to be speaking, it runs right out your mouth off the fifth strand and off chakra 5, which are all connected to the vocal expression. So there's usually you won't get bored if you're in the same workshop twice, if that happens to happen. So I hope I won't bore you guys that have been through it. It is essential for the people who haven't been through it, because Dance for Love is built on everything you learn in Dance for Life. We'll be talking about the Manu, the Mane, and the Ire force, and if you don't know what that is from Dance for Life, you're going to be totally lost as soon as we start Dance for Love. So we're going to start with there. Now, the Dance for programs, there's going to be 4 of them, and at some point they will be like a full text book. But that takes a long time. It takes a long time to get the things that I can speak to you now, and then use some diagrams and things to, bring home the most important consolidations of data. But it takes a long time to put that down, to put that verbal down in page after page after page of small print stuff, and then you have graphs and all that kind of thing. I would love to have the books ready now, but there's no way. I figure next year they may be ready, and you'll learn more then, and so will I. There will be more text given, so we'll all be able to learn more together. But for now, we have enough information and we have enough of the charts where we can learn the basics of what it takes to build what's called an Akasha Merkaba. An Akasha Merkaba is an advanced stage of Merkaba. It's the only kind of Merkaba you can use to enter the God worlds, and it's the only kind of Merkaba you can use to enter inner Earth. There are other Merkaba training courses out there that are run by different people that are using the form of the star tetrahedron-shaped Merkaba field. Now, is there anybody here that's not familiar with the word Merkaba? Okay, and it's okay if you're not. Just let me know, because oh, good. That makes it easier. Because I've been in workshops where, what's a Merkaba? It's like, uh-oh, I've got to backtrack. But we're working with a Merkaba that's of a different shape. It has 12 points and 12 planes, as opposed to the smaller type of Merkaba. The smaller type of Merkaba is what's called a biveka Merkaba. It means it can go in 2 vectors. It can go in 2 directions, but it can't go in 3. It takes a triveka, or a 3-vector Merkaba, to be able to go into the God world frequencies, and that's what we're learning to build. So as we go through, we'll go through the Dance of Life and learn about the primal life force currents, and we'll touch base on, especially for the people who haven't had any of the course yet, we'll touch base on basically what are called the 12 lessons of mastery. Now, Dance for Life started out with the 12 lessons of mastery. Some of these lessons we've been dealing with before. We started them in Kathara, in the Kathara Biospiritual Healing Program, where we began to learn about the units of consciousness called Partikai, Partike, and Particum that build up to form chelons, that build up to form the scalar wave templates of which our divine blueprint is made. So we'll touch on those basics. Those basics were given in stages at different parts, so some of it will be familiar if you've seen any of the other programs. But then it was taken into the primal forces, not just the primal currents of energy, but the primal forces of the consciousness of God that we're all made of. And this was a difference. This was bringing the consciousness of God into it, as well as the physics of the energy of Source into it. When we'll explore the 12 lessons, we'll go through them. I'll read them really quick here to you. And I tell you what page it's on, but there's no page numbers on these. Of course, that is meant to be something that you can, if you want to, teach to other people. There's also the Kundalini activation sequence that the people who didn't do it before went through. I believe, was it last night or the night before? Last night, yeah. In case you were teaching somebody, you have the preliminary exercises that need to be done for somebody coming in cold that hasn't worked with Veka codes before and hasn't worked with the Maharic seal. There's the section in the back of the book. I believe it runs from like page 51. No, actually, I think it goes a little bit before that. From page 49 to 58, I believe, is all preliminary things that people that come in absolutely new, that haven't worked with a group. And see, with our group, we're running a lot of frequency, and a lot of the people that tend to be in the groups have been working with this for a while. So people that come in and haven't done it before, you have the extra frequency support of the group. So you can run Veka code things, and at least while you're here, you'll be able to hold the frequency. But if you take that home and you haven't worked at all with Maharic seal or anything like that, Veka codes, we'll get into what they are, won't activate in the DNA or the body unless you have a certain level of D12 frequency subharmonics active in your system, your Christos frequencies. So there's a series of exercises at the back of the book that if you haven't worked with the techniques before, it's good to work with those for about a month to get your system prepared to be able to hold an activation of a VECA code. Because you can play with them all you want, but if you don't have enough frequency, it's the physics of the matter that's going to govern whether or not it's going to work for you. So it's worth it. And the things that you would need to do if you were going to take this program and say as a correspondence course and you just got it in the mail, what do I do with this? It would be the section in the last from like page 49 back that's the preliminary preparatory exercises. You won't have to do all of them here except for the Kundalini activation sequence, which does have to be done once or VECAs just won't activate in the DNA. And you guys did that the other night. So, you know, you're ready to do it here in workshop. But again, when you go home, if you haven't worked with the techniques before and you really want to begin to get the activations of the VECA codes, that you'll know what they are by the end of these workshops and why they're worth using. It's worth taking a month to work with the preliminary exercises. Yes, Diana?
Chris says there are 58 pages and I have 69.
How many?
I have 69 pages.
I have 58.
I have Dance for Love stuff. Couple people do.
Really? How'd that happen? Which ones do you have? Because they're not in order yet. If you got Dance for Love in there, the sequence, it's not there because I don't have the sequence done. That's getting done over lunch. Yeah, first 59. One. Right. Now, I just wanted to recap this little bit of information here with you. You can read this in your own book if you want to, because it's there. But the Dance 4 programs, it's a 4-section or 4-session volume, whatever you want to call it, program. Volume 1, once they're in book form, they'll be volumes, but right now they're kind of sessions, I guess you'd call them. Ideally, we would have had them all written in book form when this information was released, but because of things we'll talk about in the Metatronic workshop that's coming up day after tomorrow, it all had to be released fast. It would have been very, very irresponsible for us to not release as much as we had as quickly as possible, because there are some things happening that it will be in your best interest to have this information as soon as possible, even if it's not in its most perfected form. So. So when they're in book form, they will be volumes, and I'm almost afraid to think of how many pages those volumes might be if this is just the rough workshop manual. Because I remember Kathara started out as a rough workshop manual, and we have 220 pages in just Kathara level 1. So it may, they may grow that large. But basically, they're broken down into a series of 4 levels of study, and they are sequential, where I wouldn't want to be somebody trying to come in over here, because you need to do the activations that go with each level. Each level you will get a certain set of codes that are mathematical programs that will assist your DNA to activate in very specific ways. It's the fastest DNA activation program on the planet. It's the original DNA activation program on the planet. It's the Founders program, and it's the Christos program, which is very different than other ones that try to get certain levels of the DNA activated and not on a D12 current. D12 always refers to what they call the Christos frequency, the D12 divine blueprint, pre-matter, liquid light frequency. All of the programs from Kathara Healing, the other Kathara Healing program we have, to all of these, all run on a D12 carrier wave, which means if we can't access D12 frequency, none of these programs will work in the body. You cannot build the Akasha Merkaba without a minimum of D12 being able to run through you. So everything here is built on a D12 Christos frequency and higher. We work with the higher frequencies of the God worlds as well that we'll cover very, very quickly, but intensely enough. It's different than any other program that's out there right now. I've looked at other metaphysical stuff, and it's just not out there. Nobody else that I've seen is teaching this, and it's frustrating because I wish they were. I wish there were other people that were talking with the Guardians, but most people are too busy talking to Anunnaki channels right now, and what we're getting is what's called the Templar Ascension Program. The Templar Ascension Program are the Templar Melchizedeks. The Templar Melchizedeks are Anunnaki-based individuals who have to do with a place called Phantom Matrix that we'll talk more about when we get into the Metatronics course. But they are not using D12 frequency because they do not have the ability to run D12 Christic current because they don't have the D12 divine spark. So they're teaching you a different type of mechanics that are called Metatronics. We'll talk about that later. This is all based on the D12 and higher frequencies, the Christos frequencies, and those that will allow you to, first of all, remember what the heck the God worlds are and maybe why you might want to go there, and be able to bring that into a reality in your body, not just as a wishful thinking or a hope or a dream that you might someday be able to do this thing that some people call ascension, but bring the reality of ascension back. This is an ascension course, but it's not an ascension course that has you doing 20 Hail Marys and bowing down to Archangel Michael in order to get yourself someplace that you hope is where God lives. It's a way to remember who you are and to remember that you were never separated from God in the first place. However, your body is as much a part of your relationship to God as you are. And your body, our bodies on this planet have been our prisons for a very long time because we have had the information on how to work them properly taken away from us. We have also had genetic mutations that were done that made us literally imprisoned in our bodies, where we had to die instead of ascend. This is changing. It's not going to change overnight. But this is going to be the first wave, the first generation of people in the last 25,000 years who have had the information given back to them that will make that a plausible reality. Not everybody is going to have enough time in this ascension cycle to fix the bodies enough to get them through a gate, but your consciousness can still go. And if you end up in a situation, whether or not you can fix your body enough to get your DNA back to where it needs to be to actually be able to go through a stargate without blowing up, because that's what happens. You take a body that can't hold frequency through a stargate, and it will spontaneously implode. And that means your consciousness gets fragmented all over the place, and that's not what you want to happen. So some people will do the traditional, or what's traditional in the last 25,000 years, which is dye the body. That's okay, as long as you know how to do it. You leave that behind and get your consciousness through a gate, incarnate into a higher cycle up where you don't have to come down here anymore. All right, that's the least you'll get out of this program. The most you might get out of this program, and it's not something I can promise you, or that I can even promise myself, or as can promise myself, or anything, because there's so much work that needs to be done in these bodies, and there's not a whole lot of time and a whole lot of support down here right now that's going to help us do that. But we may be able to literally walk through a stargate. That has been something that has been denied human beings since Atlantis. In Atlantis, there was a limited potential to do that, because the grids were damaged ever since 208,216 BC. That's like 200,000 years ago. That's, way before the Atlantis story, which was only 9,558 BC when it ended. The potentials that are being brought back to us now are phenomenal. They're unprecedented in anything that we call history here, right now. If I didn't know the truth of these things, if I hadn't been physically, with a lot of help, dragged into inner Earth, and there was DNA activations done on my body to make me be able to go through those portals. There were also buffers put around me called spaceships that were allowed to take me through, because spaceships serve one purpose. If you can't fully build a Merkaba yet, there are certain vessels that will provide some degree of protection in going through gates where you can temporarily go, but you can't stay on the other side unless your body can hold the frequency. So anyway, the things that I'm talking about with Ascension, this is not some light, love, and clueless class that's going to get your hopes built up and tell you to worship this guy or that guy and call in this spirit and that spirit to fix it for you. It is not a class like that. It is a class that's going to teach you. You are going to be your own best teacher. And by the time you get done understanding the fact that you're an avatar and remembering what that means, you're not going to want anybody to pray to. You don't need to pray to anybody. You can love God and you can ask God for help, sure. But do it with dignity, for goodness sakes. You don't have to grovel before God. We're taught to grovel before false gods in our culture since Atlantis, since they took our books and they mutilated them. They took the books and the truth and they twisted them into fairy tale fantasies, putting big father gods and sister gods sometimes up for us to worship and grovel before, because we're pathetic, lowly, sinful creatures, and you only have to kiss up to God just like you have to kiss up to the boss at work to get the promotion. Well, if you want ascension, you have to pray and grovel and beg. Nothing wrong with praying if it's done with self-dignity. You can say, hey, I love you, God, and I know you're bigger than me, and that level has so much more, and I know I'm a part of you, and I know you love me. And would you please help me out with this one? I figured it out as much as I can, and I'm stuck. Would you please help? You can have this kind of relationship with God. You don't have to go cut the head off a goat and drip its blood someplace in order to please God enough that it might pay attention to you. This was the old way. You don't have to go to a priest and beg his forgiveness, especially if he's messing with altar boys. I couldn't resist. I couldn't. You don't need intermediaries. This course is about how to get there without the intermediaries. And once you get that taste of freedom and dignity back, you look at what's going on in the rest of the world and you start to see how twisted it is. And it's only then, when you start to feel the freedom that emerges inside of you, that you begin to see what you're walking around in on this planet. This planet has been a prison planet since 25,500 BC. The only people in the universe that don't know that are the people who live here. Interesting. It's been a mind control planet since the Anunnaki came in and took over and programmed things in here that didn't belong here. This is a time of freedom and of bringing our freedom back to ourselves. And it doesn't start with first necessarily knowing the big political drama that we're right smack in the middle of right now in our time frame, because we are. It starts with knowing your parts, knowing you. There was a saying once upon a time of, know yourself and you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The person who said that was the person we call Joshua 12. Some people call him Jesus Christ. Some people say he died on a cross, which he didn't. He taught this. We know that because we were incarnate at the same time, and we knew this person, and we helped teach this. That's why we're back doing it again. So these are the original Christian teachings. But I haven't met what they call kind of like Bible-thumping Christian yet that wanted to hear it. They're more interested and they're more brainwashed into groveling before a cross. And I always asked, why? If you had a choice to believe that A, your Savior was crucified and martyred and like dead on a cross and had to suffer and die for your sins so you can feel guilty from now until eternity, or your Savior was smarter than that. He knew how to get close to God because he had all the teachings. He brought him here and taught him to you and then said, well, I did what I can for now. I'm going to leave. Bye, guys. I'll be back sometime soon. Why would you choose? Why would you defend with your life and absolutely despise a messenger that tells you anything different? Why do they choose to instead worship a crucifix, worship a cross, and worship suffering, as opposed to worshiping, just looking at, just trying to understand the teachings that Jesus actually brought here? And they weren't just the teachings of Jesus. They were Magi, the Grail Line, Indigo children, all through history, were the ones commissioned with bringing these teachings back, keeping the gene codes alive, so the 12-strand and higher DNA template would be available for the human being. So we didn't lose the ability to be Christos beings. So no matter how lost we might have gotten densities down here, we'd be able to get found again. These are the teachings that are the freedom teachings. What's a little hard about the freedom teachings is once you really get a taste for them, you start to work with the techniques. And the techniques aren't that hard. It's just like, and what's the hardest about all this is learning why the techniques work and why they're important. The techniques themselves are not that difficult. What is challenging is the theory that goes with them. What is a Vecca code? You know what I mean? What is a Maharata ray? What is a Manu? I mean, there's all these new words. Once we learn those words, it's not that difficult. But this is the beginning of an interesting journey, because there are basically two reactions to this information that people have. One is they look at it and go, oh my God, oh my existence, I've been waiting for this. They feel it. There's a piece of them from way back that knew they knew this, and it tickles that piece. And you might not get all the pieces together yet, but you feel it. I'm going to learn more. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try these exercises. I'm going to really work at this and see what happens. And then as the others go, it's the Antichrist. You know what I mean? I've literally had people do that. And say, I'm sorry. Archangel Michael says you're evil. Yeah. And so who pointed fingers first? Because I tend to play the cosmic whistleblower. Az and I are kind of in that role, not really because we want to be, but because we promised we'd tell the truth when the times came, that the truth had to be told. And sometimes the truth isn't very popular, particularly among groups of people who are lying, and they don't want to be exposed. So anyway, you might love the teachings or hate the teachings. We have no attachment to that. We're not going to think any lesser of you if you decide you don't want anything to do with our teachings. We hope that you will find that little tickle of spiritual freedom, a little part of yourself that remembers enough to say, oh my God, there's freedom there. There's something here that I can go places that I always thought I could, but they always told me I couldn't. You can. You can take your body through a Stargate, or you can call it an ascension passage if you want to. Doesn't matter, Stargate, ascension passage, they're all the same thing. This is the beginning of an opening that's going to occur, the people who get to experience that opening, will be the ones who have done the work. The work involves conscious evolution, getting control of your energy, part of which is your body. That's what these teachings are for right now. These teachings, technically, we should have had 25 years to be able to bring through. It wasn't until September of 2000 that the political events surrounding this planet at this time went in a direction that required absolute, immediate, get the teachings out as fast as possible, because there's some nasty stuff going down here, and people really need to be able to fortify their fields fast. That's why it's all being thrown at people right now. Here it is. Do what you can with it. We get it down as best as we can and as clear as we can right now. But you will have the techniques, and the techniques are simple. Some people say, "Wow, I learned all that. Oh, the stuff is really great." I mean, that's all I got to do. I just have to do those 4 things. I can just use that technique and that technique and that technique, and they're really not that hard. I can take like 20 minutes out of a day, and that's going to get me to ascension. Really? It's like I don't have to go up in a monastery for 6 months and like eat once every 3 weeks and say Om 5 billion times or anything. No, you don't have to do that. But you do have to work with the techniques. They're like a bicycle leaning up against the garage. If you want to get somewhere on it, you have to get on it and ride it. And that's what this course is about. It's teaching you where your bicycle is. You've had it all along. You just kind of like stuck it in the garage and got buried behind other things. So the Dance for programs have Dance for Life, which was one. It's called Mastering the Nada Huva Body. Nada Huva Body. A Huva body is a 3-dimensional tritone energy field. Our bodies are composed of them. We'll talk a little bit about them. There's mostly featured in Tangible Structure of the Soul class. That's one of the original introductory teaching aids that we have, the Tangible Structure of the Soul, Accelerated Biospiritual Evolution Program. That's a mouthful. That one gets into the Huva bodies. They're basically talking about the parts of the auric field, each dimensionalized level, and they go in sets of 3. So the Nada Huva body is the first level, dimension 1, 2, and 3. So the first part of this the Dance for programs, the Dance for Life, is in beginning to master the energies of your dimension 1, 2, and 3 level self. Dimension 1, 2, and 3 encompasses your physical body as you know it here on D1, your D2 emotional body, that thing we call emotions or E, motion. That has to do with your strand 2, your second dimensional frequencies. That is your emotional body. And then you have your mental body, which is your D3 level. All of them are levels of consciousness. This is a level of consciousness too, even though it's consciousness that right now we identify as matter. Each of the levels of your consciousness has its own version of matter. So you have a tangible, a mental body, a tangible emotional body, and a whole bunch of bodies up above that. So when we talk about Huva bodies, we're talking about the 3-dimensional energy fields that hold our consciousness. What they're composed of and built upon are those scalar wave things I talked about before. Each of the Huva bodies has a template that's part of a larger template that's your divine blueprint. That template of scalar waves holds your consciousness into form. That's how you get your consciousness down here, where you can experience a 3-dimensional holographic perception that you call 3D reality. So this one's dealing with the first level. It's called Density 1, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Now, we're doing radial body activation. Radial body is interesting. The radial body is the part of the anatomy that actually has a huge effect on controlling the rest of the multidimensional anatomy. For about 2 years, we've been working on bringing the different pieces of the multidimensional anatomy into a sequential understanding, where we'll cover that really quickly in Dance for Life. We have some of the graphs from Kathara. If anybody wants to investigate it more fully, the Kathara Biospiritual Healing System gives you, it's exhausting, actually. It gives you everything from the context of healing, which is dimensional structure, primal substance, primal order, all of that, with all the small writing that goes with it. And then it takes you into the levels of your body. Takes you into your core template, which is called a Kathara grid. Takes you into the 3 levels of the Kathara grid. Starts with a thing that looks like the Tree of Life with the 12 centers on it, and it builds up from there. Takes you into chakras, axiotonal lines, all of the things that you hear healers talk about out there. So Kathara healing takes you more in-depth into those. We will touch upon them here so you see where they fit. Because if you don't know your anatomy, you're not going to know where to run what current. Even if you know the names of currents and what they're about, if you don't know where your parts are, you're not going to know where to put them. So we give you a basic rundown of the body parts and your system parts and, basically how they fit together. Because it's been a long time on this planet since we've had the information. It's like somebody threw out all the health books. Where do the pieces fit? It's kind of like in a couple hundred years ago, before there were any medical books written. Like you knew people died. You could look at the corpse on the outside. What is in there? They learned by ripping them apart and finding out what was in there. Fortunately, we don't have to dissect ourselves to find out what our subtle bodies are created from. Our subtle bodies hold the blueprints for the physicality of our bodies here. It's because of distortions in the DNA template that manifest as distortions within different levels of the subtle bodies that we have distortions in our matter bodies, where we're about, I think it's about 3 times as dense as we're supposed to be. The matter here is not supposed to be, and this whole system is not supposed to be as dense as it is. The matter here has become a prison because it's overladen with frequency that's built up and can't move. When we work with the frequencies in any of these courses, we're beginning to move that energy. We're beginning to turn it back around so it can pass through and open up the channels of frequency. So we are making changes in not just our spirit. We are bringing our spirit through in order to make changes in our mental, emotional, and physical bodies. And what's so great about it is you don't have to worship anybody. You don't have to ask any angel. You don't have to ask any ascended master to do it for you. You don't have to call upon the lords of karma. You don't have to call upon anybody except your own crystal self, the part of you that's always lived with its consciousness stationed in D12. Part of you left up there in those frequencies to get down here. It's been with you all along, and it's you. It's nobody else. That part's directly connected to Source. This is what this program is about, is getting that part of your consciousness back into your body here so it can fix what's gone wrong in your particular life frame down here, so you can have the freedom that you were given that you were actually born into this time matrix with. We have Dance for Life, 12 lessons of mastery, 12 attitudes of mastery, and 12 actions of mastery. Now, they're not the only 12 lessons of mastery in the universe, but they're 12 good ones. They're not the only 12 attitudes either, but they're 12 good ones. They're a good place to start. And they're not the only 12 actions by far, but they're all a good place to start. Now, by the time we get down to 4 times the 3 12s, we end up with like 144 different elements of mastery. When you put them all together, you have a pretty powerful program of getting a handle on yourself, on each level of yourself, and bringing those parts all together. We'll start with this. I'll read these down through on the list of the 12 lessons of mastery, because that's one of the hardest sections. And it's like kind of like getting hit with a train when you first go. If you've been through this program before, even know Kathara, it won't be so hard. But if you're somebody coming in cold to this program, or you're going to teach it to a cold audience, this is the thing that hits like a locomotive, because those 12 things go everywhere from primal substance to primal order to a whole bunches of words that nobody's ever heard before until you've studied them. This is like the theory in a nutshell, right? The theory that has many, many books written about it. So these, no, I'm almost done. Okay. So this is one of the hardest sections. Well, I can speak for these two anyway. I haven't seen what these are yet. And after the echo maps, I'm afraid to almost, because they were pretty intense. But the theory is given here. Without this section, you'd be lost talking about the rest of it. But there's a very logical series of events. The universe is a very simple place. It has room for the most eloquent sophistication, but there is a simple interrelationship between all parts and all things that no matter how complex it is, it fits neatly someplace. That's God's design of this universe. That's what shows that no Big Bang that just so happened to happen created it. There's an intelligence behind it, and it's obvious within the way things are structured. So we learn the basics of the structure. The attitudes are not focused on heavily in this particular course. There are some that are listed there. We could do a whole workshop on attitudes, because attitude is very important. There's a level where we will get into eventually that has to do with attitude and thought patterns and how they embed in the DNA template and how they create chemical realities in your bodies that will either help you through a Stargate or stop you from going. So it's kind of like, there's a lot of people I've met in the New Age movement especially who walk around on a cloud and say, I'm in Christ consciousness. They really like to believe they are. They really need to believe they are, because they get really upset if somebody says they're not. And that's how you know they're not. Because if you're in Christ consciousness and somebody says, you're not in Christ consciousness, okay, whatever. We're entitled to our opinion. But there are certain people who really are attached to having the outside persona of it. They can do that. But the only persons they're harming, the only persons they're conning are themselves. Because what they have is the content of their consciousness does manifest in chemical terms in the DNA and in the body. And that body's chemicals will determine whether it can actually ascend or not. So there's an important factor when they say, oh, get rid of ego. A lot of people are into go kill your ego. And then they try to pretend they have no ego. right? My ego is dead. I killed it. I threw it out. I sent it packing and threw its clothes on the lawn. I mean, there's a lot of belief systems that teach you to do this. They didn't even teach you what an ego is in the first place. An ego is simply the part of you that looks out on 3D here. It belongs there. It's kind of like, fine, I'll leave my emotional body and I'll leave my spiritual body, my physical body, but I'm throwing my mental body out the window. Your ego goes with your mental body. However, there is negative ego, which is when the mental body gets confused, and it creates all sorts of self-justification patterns because it really believes it's worthless. It has to prove its worth to itself. So it creates all sorts of compensation patterns where it feels really inferior, so it walks around being real arrogant because it knows it's really cool, because it really needs to believe it's really cool because it feels so horrible and tiny and pathetic. People that have attitude issues, and sometimes they're very easy to spot in the world. Sometimes whole races have them. But when you see individuals that are throwing their weight around and you just kind of like roll your eyes like, oh, brother, talk about egomaniac. People with negative ego, and we all have some touches of it. It might be just fear patterns, defensive patterns. They come from a place of not fully remembering our connection to God. If we remembered we are all divine beings, we are all created equal, right? Whether or not we have equal level of this, that, or that, we're of equal value. If we realize that we are all blessed and that God really loves us, there is a God that does love us, and that we have an auto-guidance system right within ourselves that will guide us through the worst of anything if we only listen and learn to hear it, you don't need negative ego. Negative ego is to protect the personality when it believes it doesn't have any connection to anything else. A personality who feels lost in space-time. That's where ego comes from. That's the negative ego is what a lot of spiritual traditions try to like annihilate and assassinate and make it go away and like really torture you until you get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. It's a part of you. You need to heal it and integrate it. That's what this program also works with. Now, we'll do attitudes. There'll probably be more on attitudes, I would think, as we get up into here. Attitudes are also reflected in this other one in Volume 2, which is A Dance for Love. There are 12 responsibilities of mastery. These cover attitudes as well, and we'll talk about those this afternoon when we're on the Dance for Love program. The 12 vehicles and the 12 postures of mastery that are part of the Dance for Love program. Now, this is the part of the Level 2 program. If Level 1 was learning to master our Nadahuva body, or our Density 1, Dimension 1, 2, 3 body, Dance for Love is the next level up, which means our Dimension 4, 5, and 6 body, our Density 2 body. That one's called the Alpha Huva body. It's our Density 2 radio body. We're going to activate what's called our radio body. And by the end of this morning's course, we're going to know what a radio body is. All right. So the 12 vehicles and the 12 postures are very interesting. When they gave me the list of what the whole program was before they gave me any of the program, then they gave me the first part of the program, got that. What in the world are the vehicles and postures? I haven't a clue, because I didn't. I'd not heard it described that way ever, I don't think. And because I'm familiar with some of these things. I remember teaching them in various other lifetimes. Now that the records are down, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I don't remember calling them that. The vehicles and the postures are two sets of 12 mathematical code programs. This is where we learn. Up here we learn to begin working with VECA codes, and we learn a little bit about what they do. Here's where we learn what the heck they are, where they fit in the anatomy, why they're important, and we also begin to learn about what's called ECA codes and scepter codes. These have to do with activations in the bioenergetic field, in the radio body, and in the DNA, and in the consciousness that make the difference between being stuck in the 7 higher or lower heavens down here in our 15-dimensional time matrix, or being able to go into the God worlds. So there are some maps and things that will show you by the end of this afternoon's class what VECA codes are, what ECA codes are, and we'll be introducing 2 more of them. Now, for the last, how long has it been? Do you remember as September? When they first started giving us the VECAs. It was September of last year, right? Yeah. They began to, Sarasota in September, they began to give us the VECA codes, this new thing called VECA codes. I'm like, okay, whatever they are. And they were symbols, and they explained they're mathematical programs. We were familiar enough with the technologies to know that that's what the symbols worked as. And they progressively gave us a series of them. Those series of them are in the Dance for Life program. And they showed us how to work with them, at least in rudimentary terms, to begin activations in the body. And then for the Dance for Life program, they gave us another code called the Ayahea, and now they were giving us 2 more codes. There are technically 36 of them that at some point we will have. We don't have to worry about them all now because they're giving us the ones that are the main activation codes that activate sequences of other ones. By this afternoon, we'll understand why it's so important to work with them. And it's like you can pretend you don't have ECHA codes and you don't have ECHA codes. You can throw the book out and never want to hear it again, but it's not going to change the fact, just like you have eyeballs. You have ECHA codes and ECHA codes in your biosystem. They are going to react to what's happening in the planetary frequencies, and you can either learn to direct that process consciously so it goes smoothly, or let it blow up in your face and take your emotional and mental body all over the place. Because that's what's going to happen when we go into, right now, we're in a stellar activation cycle, as many of you that have heard me probably very sick of hearing me say it already. But we are in a Stargate opening cycle for the first time since 22,326 BC. That means frequencies are coming into the planetary grids, and they will come into our bodies from the planetary grids, and that will create DNA activation, whether or not our bodies are ready to handle that, and whether or not our DNA is distorted or mutated, which it is right now. If we reset the divine blueprint in our bodies, it will be able to handle that frequency naturally, and we'll progressively get the ability to ascend back. If we don't do something with the fact that our DNA is mutated right now, it is going to make us sick. You know how in the Bible they talk about the plagues that come at the end times? The plagues have to do with the fact that the body can't handle frequency. So things that would normally, first of all, be dormant, let's say bacteria, viruses, things that have been dormant for thousands of years, are going to start to wake up on the planet in response to the frequency. Now, normally our bodies would be able to have a natural immunity to that, but because our DNA has been distorted, and it doesn't order that fast unless you work consciously to clear it, we would begin having reactions to things in the atmosphere that weren't supposed to be there in the first place, as far as our scientists know. There are changes that are coming, and they're going to affect masses of people. I've talked about this in other workshops where each person that chooses conscious evolution as a path right now and chooses a program that tells them really what that's about, how to clear your DNA, how to get it activated to its highest level, how to get your integrity, biofield integrity, you will help the collective. Because if a small handful of people do that, they will be able to affect the race scalar template or the race morphogenetic field. And they will progressively be able to help more and more people that they've never even seen begin to synthesize the frequencies in their DNA. So each one of us that works with this, we are doing ourselves a favor, but we are giving a gift to the rest of the people on the planet. You know, those guys that like to point fingers at you and maybe throw rocks at you, and if they really could, they'd probably nail to you across and burn you as a witch if they knew what you were teaching, right? Those guys that are hoping some God comes down and saves them. You will be helping those guys. They won't know it, not now, but they might later. So this is a program, it's like really huge, but it's also not as bad as it used to be. The Ascension teachings used to be really hard. Each level was like 12 years of training. We don't have 12 years for each level right now. It's kind of like no holds barred. We have between now and 2012, and all sorts of wild things are going to happen, and it's really important to get a bunch of awakened ascended masters on this planet. Now, most people that are drawn to this work are what are called indigo children. Indigo children not only have the potential for 12-strand DNA that angelic humans do, and angelic humans are fine too, they're part of that team, but indigo children have anywhere from 24 to 48-strand DNA templates, so they can run huge amounts of frequency. We're here for a reason. Indigo children can flip over the race template a lot faster because they can hold more frequency, which means they can help the whole collective heal a lot faster. We're in the process of the awakening of the indigo children. And you may or may not feel that you're one of them, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you're persons who are what we call the Leviathan races. Leviathan races were people who were born through I had described it in some of the other things I talked about, through the hybridization program that was done in Atlantis to try to help some of the fallen ones get their Christic imprint back. Some people on the planet, a lot of people on the planet, are of that race line now. And that's okay if they make the right choices. All right, they can also assist in this process. They can also take a huge jump in healing right now because of the opportunities of the D12 frequency and the other support teams of the indigos and the humans that are available. So when I speak this information, when I talk to people, we are not elitist. We understand that certain people have more content in the DNA, which means right now they can hold more consciousness and more frequency in the DNA than others. But it's like saying a person in kindergarten is not valuable, but a college person is. Well, how the heck does a person get to college if they didn't go through kindergarten and everything in between? They're all of equal value. And we look at it that way. We do not teach elitism, but we do teach responsibility. if we happen to have an advantage, and there are genetic advantages in the indigo children. They can activate faster, they can wake up faster. Doesn't mean it's easy, but you can there's a lot of things you can do faster and easier than people who don't have that kind of DNA. But I don't think it's socialist, and I don't really care if it is. I don't care what label anybody wants to put on it. But it's a Christos principle that if you have an advantage and you have a gift, give that gift to the ones who need it most. You reach out to the ones who are having a hard time with something that's easy for you. Teach them so it can become easy for them. They don't teach that in the schools in America. They teach kids to compete with each other and gloat in the fact that they have a gift as opposed to that stupid one. And the stupid ones become scapegoats. It's a horrible anti-Christos attitude. When it comes to gene codes and human beings, we would be no better if, being indigo children, we looked at people who were of the Illuminati races, who are still making some bad choices, some of them. Some of them are still hell-bent on creating war. They don't want to hear anything spiritual. Some of them are very much like that. That is an attribute of the consciousness they have and the genetic distortion that creates that consciousness. If we approach them with anything other than love, we would be no better. And the idea isn't to be better, it's to recognize we're all one. So these teachings go for everybody. Everybody has a different potential. Just like I said, I can't promise you'll be able to take the body you've got right now through a Stargate by 2012. But I can promise you that potential exists and some people will. You can be one of those people. But I can't determine that for you. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get my own body up enough because I tend to drain it a lot doing stuff like this, getting it all on paper. I tend to work too much and I don't take enough care of myself. I do that knowing that it might make it where, when it comes time, I can't quite activate fast enough to get out when I need to. But I do that because I know, well, that's all right. If I don't take the body, I'm going anyway. As and I know this. So, we work that way. We give a lot in service where it's almost like, I hate to say, sometimes do as we say but not as we do. We tend to abuse ourselves a bit. We don't sleep enough. We push hard when it comes to working. We wouldn't advise you doing that, but we'd understand if you did. But it's a conscious decision. If your big thing is you really want to take your body through, you need to right now start listening to your body and start giving your body what it needs. That means silly little things from if that particular outfit is stylish, but it squashes your chakras up right here, don't wear it. Because you're blocking energy and you're creating energy squishes and broken lines of energy that have to be repaired, and it takes energy and attention to repair those things. Little things to big things, like if you notice, Az and I smoke cigarettes. It's another thing we don't recommend. Keeps us in body. We have a tendency to get way up in frequency, and it keeps you very well grounded. Have a cigarette, you bang, you're right down in body again. It drops your frequency, which on some occasions is very useful. It's not the best way to do it, but if it's the way you picked up and it's, you need to do it quick, it's easier than taking 3 months to reprogram your body on how to do that a better way. But if you're not us, I would suggest taking the time to do it. So we don't mean to do a do as I say, not as I do thing. We kind of say, here's the best way. We don't quite do it the best way yet. We have our reasons for not doing it because there are other priorities that we have to balance. But if you want to get through gates, and that's your absolute first and most important priority, put that first. And that means take our example and go beyond it. You know what I mean? It means if you smoke, stop. Take the 3 months it takes to totally change your chemical makeup. Let yourself fall apart emotionally and your emotional body go off the deep end for a couple of weeks. And don't dive for the chocolate to rebalance it. Give yourself 3 months to dry out. It's when you change a habit pattern, you're going to find this total lost in space feeling. It can be an eating pattern. It can be a sleeping pattern. Some people stay up all late at night because they can't sleep, so they just glue themselves to the television and they just stay up all night. That is a pattern that your body's used to. It is a chemical signature in your body that your body is used to. So when you make any kind of change, you're going to find your body resisting it at first because it's not used to it. It's used to one set of chemicals. You're creating changes that make other sets of chemicals. When you begin to work with Vecca codes, when you begin to work with any of these frequencies, you'll begin to notice body changes. They'll be subtle at first. First thing may be, I don't want to. I know I should, but I don't want to. You really just don't feel like it. That's one stuck in this rut. No, you need to want to be over here, but don't want to make that, have to do something to get to that bridge. There'll be other things, aches and pains here and there. I mean, some of the interesting effects are you may find like hollow spots appearing on your head, like under your hair, and then bumps. 2 weeks later, they go away, they balance out, but your skull changes a little bit because your brain's growing. Has to make room for your brain. So literally, there are changes that could be very interesting. I mean, I'm watching my weight go up and down like a yo-yo. It's absolutely ridiculous. In the last 2 years, it's been up, and I'm kind of going, oh my God, whose body am I in? It doesn't even look like me anymore. I know that will balance out as well. But there are changes. There are changes that are kind of funny, and there's changes that aren't so funny, like where you feel like you have arthritis, for like 3 years. Because your DNA is activating rapidly, and it's releasing toxins in the body. The body is doing the best it can to process them and clear them, but it's got more to deal with than a person who's not activating DNA, so it creates buildup in the tissues. If you're not paying attention to cleansing, internal cleansing, eating things that are good for you, fasting every once in a while with just liquids, just to clear your system out, using salt baths to pull the toxins out of your body, you'll find you have more joint aches. You might get headaches because your pineal seals are opening. So there's all these different effects that you will get at some point or another. Some people will get them more strongly than others. It's all part of the process. Nobody ever said it was easy, like snap your fingers and poof, now I'm a Christ-conscious being and I can walk through stargates. It's like just because I intend, I can immediately right now reverse mutate 25,500 years worth of mutation in my DNA just because I want to. Yes, you can. Like that, good luck to you. It takes some work. And this is one of the things that the other ascension teachers like to pick on me about. Oh, we'll just hand it over to the Lords of Karma and they'll fix it for you. It's like, yeah, will they really? Let me talk to one of those Lords of Karma. Do they know how to fix it? Do they know what parts go with what parts? Do they even know what the genetic mutation is? And the answer to those questions is no. So we have a project. We'll get out from it what we put into it. When we get up into these classes here, this ought to be interesting, because after seeing what came out for Dance for Love, I can't even imagine what's going to come out for these two. This one is supposed to be given in France, and I can hardly wait because I don't even have the text for this one done yet, and that's coming soon in November, I believe. This one's going to be given in France, Dance for Freedom. That's mastering what's called the Beta Huva body, which is the density 3 body, your dimensions 7, 8, and 9 body. And then the last one is called the Dance for Joy, mastering the Mahara Huva body. That's the avatar identity level. That's when you activate your density 4 radial body, which is your avatar level of consciousness. By then, we should all be a bit different than we are right now. When we work through these programs, we notice the differences in just working with the beginning programs. And progressively, we're going to be given more powerful sets of mathematical programs to work with, the VECA codes and the ECA codes, and more knowledge on where they fit and how to work with them. Eventually, when we get up into this point, it's going to be about knowing you can handle your own body, knowing how to size up, whether or not you're actually going to take the body through a gate this time, or whether you're preparing for, have a nice time while I'm here and then just ease my way out. Because for some people, it won't be worth it. It may just take too much effort to clear whatever needs to be cleared in the body to worry about taking it through. There are some people who simply choose to drop the body. Dying is not a bad thing. I mean, it's ideal to take your body with you. Usually then you just transmute it to a higher level and you don't have issues down here. Like bodies down here run away on their own. They have a whole mind of their own that's like kind of twisted because of the genetic mutation. They get fat, they get old, they fall apart, they hurt, those kind of things. When you get to the point where you've entered inner earth and you enter into the God world spaces, that changes. Those bodies do not go through those processes. There's a progressive healing. If you take a body here and you heal it enough where you can drag it through a gate, because that's what it's going to be. The best of us that get our codes up the highest is going to be crawling through those gates. We had 25,500 years of mutation in the gene code. Our flesh is 3 times as dense as it's supposed to be. And we're going to take it in a process of like less than 10 years and change all that, enough to like walk through. We'll probably be staggering through. But if we get through, that's fine, because once we get on the other side, we can do the rest of the repair work. And that's what it's about. But even if you don't, some people will simply say, I just want to incarnate in there. I've got enough frequency in the body here. I built enough up where I know that if I tried a little harder, I could get the whole body through. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to be fixed. But I got the consciousness, because it's in this body that I've been working with, up high enough that if I just went to sleep and learned to dying well, which is moving yourself gently out of your crown chakra, just how you got in when you were a baby, and moving it someplace else. Some people will choose to do that instead. And it doesn't matter. A person who ascends is not better than a person who chooses death. Eventually, we will all have death as a distant memory. It's not normal for the human condition, and eventually we'll have ourselves back. Humans were originally something called Orophim. They were light beings. They were breatharians. They didn't eat. They didn't have to. They simply breathed and kept their Merkabas going at the right speed, and they would be able to simply interact with the air and draw nutrients in from the air, and what was expelled back into the air assisted the evolution of the planet as well. It didn't send toxins back. It sent energy, a different form of energy back. This is what we're evolving back toward. It's going to take some time to get there. Some will go faster than others. Some of it will depend on, did you come in this time with an indigo imprint, which is one of those higher strand templates, or did you come in with a 12-strand human imprint, or did you come in with a Leviathan imprint? Whichever it is, it doesn't matter. What matters is getting a feel for it yourself. This is where self-honesty is really important. I don't care if you're an indigo ascended master or if you're a Leviathan with like 4.5 strands. I really don't care. I love you anyway. But it's important to be able to get your own egos out of the way enough to start to get a feel when you start working with your own Christos consciousness. See, every being, once upon a time, had a Christos self. Even the fallen ones have a Christos level of self that they're not plugged into anymore, and it will take work to get plugged back into. But there's a level of self-honesty that's required with any of these classes. You're not in a competition. What's most important is identifying who you are and what you're carrying, so you know what the next step is to get you where you want to go. If you're a person who says, well, I have to be the best, you know how a lot of us are programmed. You have to be the best in everything. I have to be the A student. I have to be the first in line. I have to be the one that gets the biggest job promotion, you know, all that kind of stuff. That kind of person is going to have a hard time saying, oh, my God, I only have like 4.5 strands. What happened to my 12? You know, it will be hard on the ego level for a person who bases their worth on externalized competition things. If a person who is a Leviathan person who has a very small, say, strand content and doesn't have the Christos spark, which means they don't have 12 sub-frequency bands in every strand, there are certain things they need to do to get themselves to the next level so they can get those 12-strand patterns. And if they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they're having those problems, they're not going to take the steps they need to fix the problems. So this is why it's important to be aware that whoever you are, that's not my business. Okay, I'm not going to go around saying, that one's a this, that one's a that. You know, after a while, you actually can tell just by field resonance about how much who carries what. But it's still not your business, except for your own. Right? So you shut it off. That's why don't even ask me, because I'm not going to go there. Once in a while, they would have us do readings, private ones. I really hated that. I hated having to do that. I wanted to teach people how to do it for themselves as opposed to doing it. But there was a time when we first started with the work that we were doing DNA scans because we were asked to as a service to people, and there was a few people that, you know, came and had that done. I believe in this course here we're going to get into being able to read your own DNA. That's what I hear anyway. It's in one of these two, but I think it's in the next one, the Dance for Freedom. So this is where freedom comes in. Once you've learned how to do these things, then it's time for kind of like, that big judgment day. Nobody's judging you, but it's time to assess what you got and decide what you're going to do with it. So in this course, we will get into some of the DNA, self-identification of the DNA. And here I also believe after you've worked with these programs and worked with these mathematical codes in your bodies, you will have enough frequency in your DNA template. And now the planet has enough frequency in the grids where by the time we get to here, and that's like toward the end of this year, there's a scan that we've been doing, which is pulling you have a set of personal mathematical codes that are very specific to your own divine blueprint. Nobody else has those codes. They're stored at the base of the spine. We'll be taught how to do that. It's called a Raja Huva scan, and you'll be taught how to do that there too, so you can find out what you've got. And you've already been doing a lot of good stuff with it. And these things will work no matter what you have. If you don't have 12-strand pattern, you can still run pieces of subharmonics, especially if you're in a group of people who are running 12-strand. They will support the field. If you find that you're a person who doesn't have a full 12-strand pattern, that's okay, because there are beings that you were connected to once, your original family of consciousness, that will assist in what's called a host matrix, which means your own avatar that you had once upon a time before you took a fall, probably to explore what it meant to do that, that part of you will still help you to get back through. So these work for everybody. and they work if you work them. Okay, let's see. I think it's time to go on next. If I spend this long on every page, we'll be here till next Tuesday. As usual, I do that all the time. Okay. The 12 lessons of mastery, or 12 good ones to start with anyway. The 12 lessons of mastery are basically telling you the framework. This gives you the framework of the parts of things you're dealing with. If you want to learn how to be a master, you have first of all have to learn of what are the elements of things. What am I trying to master? If you're going to learn to, say, be a master mechanic of a car, it helps to know what an engine is. It helps to know what parts an engine has. It helps to know that you put gas in the car and not water as far as its fuel, those kind of things. So this is like a basic introductory course to your parts, to your engine, what makes you run, what basically you're supposed to do with it to make it run well. If you're going to master beingness, you need to know these parts. This is why I get frustrated with some of the other ascension teachings, is they don't teach you anything. They tell you a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. They tell you to worship this, worship that, say these magic words. We got magic words too, but we tell you where they go and we tell you what they do. They don't tell you your body parts. They tell you have 7 chakras. What about the others? There's 15 primary ones. They don't tell you where your auric field fits with your chakras, where your axitonial lines fit with that. They don't even tell you what a Kathara grid is, some mystical secret thing called the Tree of Life that the ancient Kabbalists knew what it was about. They don't teach you where the parts fit. Through this, you will learn where the parts fit. You will learn basic dimensional structure. You will learn that dimensions are things. They're not just an adjective to describe certain qualities about a thing, like it has this type of dimension or that type of dimension. Dimensions are nouns, the way we use them. The word is a noun. It is referring to a very specific grouping of scalar wave patterns and what we call flashline sequences. A flashline sequence can be compared to, say, a string of Christmas lights or a setup of light bulbs where they turn on and off at different rhythms, repeatedly. The light bulbs don't move. They stay stationary. But it looks like moving light as they flash on and off at different rhythms. Kind of like a marquee around some, the old theaters used to have them where you'd see the lights go, and it looked like the lights were a moving band, but it was really the light bulbs just flashing on and off in sequences. Dimensions can be compared to a string of Christmas tree lights or a marquee, where each of them they are standing scalar wave patterns. Now, a scalar wave is simply a columnar wave of vibration and oscillation. A fixed point, lots of fixed points lined up together, forms a dimensional band. When they turn off and on, they form what appears to be arcs of light that move. These are the scalar wave templates that everything is built upon. So once you know that much, that's not that hard. Think light bulbs, think Christmas tree lights. It's not that hard. Once you've got the basic structure of things, you start to find out where parts fit. Like, helps to know we got 7 higher and lower heavens. What does that mean? Well, that comes into dimensional structure. If you can think of the word dimension, and now you know it has to do with flashline sequences, little light bulbs flashing on and off, frequency. Those light bulbs are the things that hold your consciousness. So you can look at it as your consciousness is that light that flashes on and off. These are the things that hold your consciousness and take it from its at-one-ment with Source, take it down into dimensionalization, where it can begin to experience itself as separate from Source, as an individual identity. So your template, your flashline sequence, your set of Christmas tree lights that is you, is holding your consciousness into a specific relationship with itself and with God, so you can perceive yourself as if you were separate from God. It's an illusion, and it's a hologram. It's a hologram that was intended to be joyful. It was intended to allow God to explore itself and find out more about itself by making itself into many different faces. This is what is meant by we are all one. There is only one consciousness in the whole entire cosmos. There's only one identity in the whole entire cosmos. And that is you. That is God. There is no difference. But when God puts itself in pieces down here, especially if it allows part of its DNA to be turned off, it completely forgets that. And then we walk around thinking, you're different than me. Well, I like you because you're similar to me, but I don't like you because you're very different from me. We forget that we are that one consciousness. I am you, you are me, we are the seats we're sitting on, we are the bugs that are crawling on the floor, they're so tiny we can't see them, we are the fallen angelics. They are all the we. If we know ourselves as God, there is not a thing that is outside of what we are. So therefore, there is not a thing that is not lovable, that is not self. There is no other. There is no us versus them. There is only one. This is part of the understanding that at first it sounds like words. The mental body goes, cool. Bless you. Yeah, that kind of sounds right. Yeah, some part of me knows that. The emotional body goes flatline. Mental body's going, yeah, okay. Emotional body is kind of like, doesn't compute. Okay, I'll buy that. That sounds really great. That means we can just love everybody, right? Like love in clueless space. That's the first reaction. Just love everything. Go up to a tiger and hug it, even if it's still on a meat-eating program where it's going to rip your face off. You know what I mean? Open your heart to a fallen angelic and let it take full possession of your body so you never see yourself again. I mean, if you want to, you can do it this way. The emotional reality of oneness cannot fully be experienced down here in the bodies we have as they're functioning right now. But it can be touched. It can be touched enough to know its reality, and it can be expanded to a point where you can walk around and look at other people and see all of their faces at the same time, all their incarnations, and know they're you. You could look at me and know that I'm you. And I can look at you and know the same. That's when it gets fun. It's very challenging, especially if somebody's like the mugger that's going to come and steal your purse kind of thing, right? And stop for a moment and say, I'm you, and you're me. Why am I stealing from myself? This is one of the lessons. If you start to ask yourself these questions, the hologram starts to change. If somebody comes up and smacks you, you say, why'd you do that? You're a bad person. Why would you ever do that to me? You say, why did I just smack myself? What am I trying to teach myself? What am I showing myself here? This is what part of being accountable for your hologram is about. You either manufacture this hologram because you are a face of God that is right now on autopilot, manufacturing a hologram to walk around in, or we're in a universe where we have no control, we're in a harsh universe that inflicts itself upon us. It's either one way or the other. And you either take responsibility for the whole thing or you don't. As long as you have 1 ounce of blame left, if you're going to blame anybody, blame the government, blame the fallen angelics, blame your husband, blame your kid, blame anybody, even if they're the ones that are playing the role of, yes, they're the one that did it. Because there are people who, yes, play the victimizer and others play the victims. If you want to get beyond that game, you own both parts. I am God. I am one with God. That means I am both victim and victimizer. That being is demonstrating a part of myself for me. So you take the charge off the other person and bring it home and say, what am I trying to learn? How do I heal this? There's a level of oneness that's about accountability. It's about overcoming fear. Because as long as you believe in victim and victimizers, you will be afraid. Do you know who are the most afraid? The victimizers. They're more afraid than the victims. They get so afraid, and usually victimizers were victims for a long time until they got sick of it and they snapped. Then they decide they're going to play the other polarity. And they're going to go get them. And they turn into sometimes very irrational victimizers. Victim-victimizer is a game of polarity. It's a game of distortion that's encoded in our DNA right now, but it's not a natural game. It isn't a game that God originally intended for this time matrix. It's a game that evolved because sometimes when you combine certain things, you get other things than you originally thought you might. And when you let those things go for 250 billion years to see what they might do and see if you can heal them, sometimes they create things you really didn't want to hear. And sometimes you have to deal with that and find the best way to heal it. We have a victim-victimizer program running on this planet. It runs through our DNA. We call it the fight-or-flight instinct. That's what our scientists call it. The animals are suffering from it as well. There are places where animals don't eat each other. They call it the natural food chain here. Natural for where? Not for this time matrix. Beings don't need to eat each other. But here they do, because their natural ability to sustain their holographic bodies by running frequency has been cut off because a lot of their ability to run higher dimensional frequency has been shut down because the DNA template can't hold it. So they have to consume energy from something out here in their hologram. They have to eat their own hologram. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening. It's happened to us. It's happened to the animals. It's happened to the plants. It's happened to the bugs. All of those things. We're evolving past that. We were past that once upon a time. So the changes we're going to begin to make, changes that involve being accountable, saying no matter how awful my hologram is, and no matter how much I really, really could hate that person because they just killed somebody I love, and I know they held the gun, they did it, they really, really, really did. If you can look at that person and say, and that's a face of me, no matter how much it hurts, that is a face of me. Drill that into your head. You'll start to get the oneness, what it means. You can't hate. You can absolutely despise the action. Just like with a child. Child goes and breaks your favorite vase. You can be absolutely ready to scream. You can hate the fact that your vase got broke. But is it rational to hate the child for breaking your vase? No. A good parent loves the child, corrects the behavior whenever possible, whenever it's needed, if the behavior is antisocial or harmful. But they don't take the love away from the child. Some of us weren't raised with good parents that knew that yet. Some of us, we're told, like, you're either this, or this, or you're not lovable anymore, get out. My mom was kind of like that. She didn't know any better. But there's a level of accountability and oneness that go hand in hand. And one of the biggest problems we have right now is the victim-victimizer drama. You want an example, just turn on the TV and listen to the Israelis and the Palestinians. They're both absolutely convinced they're the victim. And they're absolutely, therefore, justified in victimizing the other one. Going round and round and round in circles until they implode on each other. Eventually, that whole mess is going to blow up. Because nobody's taking accountability for their hologram. And it doesn't matter how many people did icky things to you. It really doesn't. Do you want your power back, or do you want to keep giving it to them? If you don't want to keep giving it to them and you want your power back and you want to be able to begin making changes in the holographic projection you call your life, you have to own both parts. And then you set the other person, the actor, that's playing the role of that thing that's manifesting through your DNA, that victimizer. If you can realize that's a pattern in your DNA that's drawing that person to you, you can free that person, send them on their way, then deal with the pattern. That's how you end the victim-victimizer drama. And there's a lot of it we're going to be clearing. We're going in right now for a race clearing. We have race karma coming up right now from Atlantis, where we're going to see some things that we haven't seen since Atlantis, including probably flying ships with ETs that aren't too nice in them. If we go into this with a victim mindset, we're not going to be very happy with the outcome. If we go in realizing this is part of a shared hologram that we, the only we there is, which is the one, is creating. It's broken itself into pieces, and each one has a different perspective. And some of them are playing the good guys, and some of them are playing the bad guys. But both of them can learn from each other. We will stay in our power. And we'll focus our energy not on what are they going to do to get us and how do we stop them, but on what do I do with myself that's most effective. And that's where your power is. Bring it home. The power is yours. The power comes partially from recognizing that it is your responsibility to take that power and to say, either I'm going to give it to somebody else with blame, because as soon as you blame, you're saying, here, take my power, run me around by the nose, because that's what you're saying. You're giving them the opportunity, someone else the opportunity to control you and your energy. Okay. If you want your power back, you simply say, I will own my hologram no matter how icky it is. And whatever actors are playing out those roles for me, I set them free now with love. And sometimes I please just take them. Universe, take them home, please, away from me, wherever they want to be, just not where I am. That kind of thing. Now, part of the other responsibility is learning your parts. So you know what you're doing with your energy. Somebody said to you, well, I hate to tell you, God made it in a way that you're responsible for your energy. That means, if you go into, say, a neighbor's house and you use their bathroom, you don't leave pieces of toilet paper all over the floor. You clean up after yourself. You take care of your energy. You don't go and just scream icky things at other people because you feel like you're having a bad day. That's part of learning to take control of your energy. Now, we know those basic social things. We're taught those things. This is learning to take control of your energy, too. There are people that say, oh, I don't need to learn that. Really? You don't need to be responsible, huh? Who's going to control your energy if you don't? I bet there's a list. I bet you wouldn't like it if you found out who's on that list and what they'd like to do with your energy. This is part of our responsibility. If you really want to be an ascended being, you want to have the ability to be a Christed being that you were created to be in the first place, this is part of what it means. It means simply knowing the basics of some of these things and how they work. Because with this knowing, you can know what to do with energy. If you see a certain thing happening out there, you get good at this stuff, you'll be able to shift it just by the way you move energy through your field. You can stop a mugging. You can put a hijacker to sleep like a baby, make him fall down on the floor. Probably suck his thumb if you really wanted to. There's power in responsibility. If you want the power, you need to take the responsibility. I think you guys know that already, though, so that's fun. Now, I think I will go through the graphs because these work easiest. I will describe all the things. Whoops. All the things that are on this list. We'll get into the primal life force and all of that. That's on page 2, I think. Yeah, page 2 in your books. All of that stuff we're going to cover. And we're going to cover it in the way I found that's pretty much the quickest way to get things across to people. And that's through diagrams. Now, diagrams, picture paints 1,000 words. Okay? The diagrams are like a mathematical symbol code. Yeah, 6. Yes, please. You know, in the technologies that we use symbol codes, right? We bring the mathematics of that in, and it makes changes in energy in our bodies. Well, words are a type of symbol code, but then there's condensed symbol codes that are pictures. So when we use diagrams, we're actually giving you consolidated frequency that holds the information. I like to teach best off the diagrams, and I will give you, like running dialogue on what this is, where it fits, next diagram, and this is what it leads to now. There's a sequence of the diagrams. That's why if it comes down to there's only enough time to either do the written text or the diagrams, I will do the diagrams every time. I find, too, for me, the way I remember stuff, I've had people say to me, how do you ever remember all that stuff? Pictures. If I had to remember the words, I'd be clueless. But what I remember are the pictures on the diagrams. So if you can remember the pictures, once you hear what these are, or even read the chart, because usually what I do is put info bites, just enough where you know what that is. By the time you read the info bites, you should have an idea of what those pictures are about. This will give you enough of a building block of cellular memory. It's a cellular memory bridge you're building with the diagrams. So I'll work through them, and when I get going through these, I tend to go fast. So I'll try to temper that, because there are times when I hear myself, and usually it's halfway through when I'm going really, really fast, and I kind of catch the audience going, slightly like, and I uh-oh, am I going too fast? I haven't done that yet, and that's good. This is a much calmer trip, so maybe we don't have that. We usually get that in Sarasota when the data's just coming in, and it's like, you can just feel the frequency in the room. I don't want to lose anyone that hasn't done any of the work before, but I also don't want to bore anybody that's been through all of this. So we'll start here with holographic template, primal substance. This is when we get into, okay, what is the stuff the universe is made of? What are we made of? What is our consciousness made of? There are 3 basic units of consciousness that Source creates itself as. They're called Partakai, Partake, and Partakam. In a little bit, we'll get into the primal forces, the force of Source consciousness that takes on those forms, that's each associated with one of those 3 basic forms. That's the Divine Trinity. You have a Partakai unit, which is an antimatter unit. Not antimatter, but antimatter. That's before you get to matter. It's even before you get to prematter. That is a wave form, a scalar wave form. That breaks down in cycles, actually. It breaks down into polarization, forming a Partakam, over there on the left, and a Partake. The Partakam is the basis for matter particles. The Partake is the basis for antimatter particles. They're different types of wave. They're actually all one wave at 3 different phases. The Partake phase is non-polarized, full unity, which technically is not manifest. Polarization is where manifestation begins. The process of manifestation begins. A Partakam represents what's called a base magnetic unit. A base magnetic unit is a unit that vibrates. Its counterpart, formed from the same original unit, is a Partake, which is an oscillation. That is the oscillation version of that vibration. What these form are scalar waves. When it's in vibration stage, it's the light bulb turned off. When it's in oscillation stage, it's the light bulb turned on. And when it comes back together, it's gone. It goes back into pure Source consciousness. Now, the force that is associated with each of these, which we'll get to in a little while, is that there are 3 primary forces that Source decided to create. It wanted to create. It created within itself. It didn't go away from itself. There was no away from itself. The only thing in the universe that existed was it. It created inside of itself the ability to create holographic reality so that it could experience itself in pieces. It first individuated in the form of 3 forces, which were forces of Source consciousness that had specific intention behind them. The first was the Manu force, M-A-N-U. There are many words for it, but these are the words that were used by the founders in the founders' teaching, so we stay consistent with that. The Manu force was the first. It goes into the Even in the Bible, they had a version of this once upon a time, where in the beginning was the void, or the darkness, and within the darkness, Source spoke the Word, and with the Word, the light was created. They are all levels, or pieces, if you want to look at it as pieces, of Source consciousness. Source decided within itself it wanted to create. It had the desire and intention to do so. So it, like a little laser beam, it took that idea, desire to create, and focused it in a point. And from that point, that first point, which became the Manau void, the space within which creation could occur, the others, and the other two forces, came out of it. First you had the Ire. You have the Manu first, then the Ire, which is the sound vibration first, before it bursts in to full expression. It has its imprint in sound. The first thought starts to rumble. The first sound, the word is spoken. The word is a vibration, right? It's a vibration, a frequency. That vibration bursts into light or into manifestation as what's called the Manet, the three primal forces that hold the consciousness of God. These aren't just things God created and left behind to go on and do other buildings. These are the living forces of God right there in every moment. Every moment wouldn't be any moment if these forces weren't ever present and always there. They're not separate gods. They're not, oh, worship Manau or worship Ire. No. They're all aspects of the one God, and we are created of that substance. Now, the Ire, the Manau, the Mane, and the Ire correspond directly to these. You could look at those forces as the first one of these, the first trinity, the first Partakai, Partake, and Partakam. The Manu force would be consistent with the Partakai, which is the non-polarized all-one unit. It's both electrical and magnetic, and beyond that, it is the void point. So the Partakai unit corresponds to the Manu force. The Manu force takes on the form of Partakai units, which are the beginning building blocks of vibration, oscillation, and still point. You could look at Manu Partakai as the still point, out of which movement and sound and light emerge. So you have the Manau as the Partakai. The Partakam would actually be the one next, the first polarization. One becomes two, and it's actually pretty much simultaneous. It goes 1, 2, and then over to 3. So light and sound actually are created at once, but it actually comes out. The vibration would be like a nanosecond ahead. We say they're created at the same time. They polarize at the same time, but the vibration turns into the oscillation. It's the vibration in relation to the other standing vibrations that are contained within the Manau or the Partakai that create the third, which is the light. Now, this is also the divine trinity as far as male and divine female and divine male and divine spirit. So this trinity goes down into the scientific level, Partakai, Partake, Partakam, and these are the carriers of the consciousness of God, of the Manau, the Ire, and the Mane. The Manau is the force, the one, the place where it's all one. The Ire is the next, the vibration of intention, where intention gets embedded into the force that is all, into the Manau. And from that embedding emerges the light or the Mane. These are the basic forces that when you get into dimensionalization, it gets wild because they all break down into all these different sound tones and rays of light. And this is where we start to understand what the 15 rays are, what the 12 domains are. But it all starts here, Partakai, Partake, Partakam, and the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane forces that are the consciousness of God in its first organic expression. From that expression, everything else expresses within it. They're actually the first creation. Everything else takes place within. God doesn't create outside of itself. It creates within itself. So we live in God. Our world lives in God. Our universe lives in God. God's really big. But the funny thing is, God doesn't take up any space at all. It's all a hologram. You know how they have digital virtual reality programs these days? You know, that you can put yourself into this game, right? And you have your little body, your domain body in there, and it's electronic. You know, it's like an image that's created through mathematical electronic things. We're walking around in a real one, except the programmer is much, much smarter than the guys that are doing it right now in virtual reality toys. We are right now walking around in our screen domains. We exist with or without those screen domains. What's happened down here is we forgot, and we got stuck in our virtual hologram. So it's like running around in an asteroid game and forgetting that you decided to go into the asteroid game to play and then we're going to come back out. And you got really attached to being like Luke Skywalker or something. And you stayed in character and forgot you had another character that was you. That's what we're dealing with right here. Now the hologram itself is a literal phenomena of physics. It's a level of physics that's beyond what physics is known on the outside here. Now actually physics is much more known than science allows us to perceive right now. There are things taking place within world infrastructure that have to do with what's called the World Management Team. They have controlled for thousands of years, literally, the release of scientific data. There's only certain things allowed to be known and other things are not allowed to be known. Same thing with archaeological data. You know, when they find like beings with big elongated heads that look like the ancient cloister human races, they have to say they had encephalitis or something that made their brains swell so they were deformed. You know, and that's because they got caught. They didn't get to hide them before somebody found out about them and wrote about them. So there's a lot of information that in the physics that we teach here, you don't need a degree in physics to understand it. You could take this. If you had a degree in physics, you could take these concepts, use unified field theory and use quantum theory and a few other stretches by asking your spirit how to fill in the bridges between the two, and you would find out a whole lot. You'd find out how cold fusion works. You'd find out all sorts of things, how to make matter disappear, how to make it invisible, all those kind of things. It's probably a good thing that the mainstream governments and things do not have access to this level of science, because if they did, look what they're doing already. They just found out how to play with genetics. Last thing I saw last night, I'm watching the show, they created a new chicken. Anybody see that on TV last night? They figured it would be better for chickens if they created them with no feathers, because they get too hot in places that would really like to eat more chickens, but the chickens die because they get too hot. So they created a genetically altered chicken that has no feathers, and it also has less body fat. So now, of course, this saves an awful lot of time in plucking feathers and hiring people to pluck feathers and this kind of thing. There's a financial thing behind it, but they're trying to make it look like it's good for the chicken, right? These poor little things. Did you ever see a rooster naked? I mean, they're like pink. It's like maybe the feathers stop them from getting sunburned. They're all like really pink, like their head things, and they're like really pink and icky looking. If science were allowed to be run rampant and knew some of these things and how they actually work, if science knew on this level that stargates were real, God only knows what they would try to do with that. It would be absolute chaos. So we're lucky in a way. We're being taught a level of science that is beyond what mainstream is allowed to be taught. We're being laughed at, which is really great. The best protection is to not be taken seriously. You know, once we hit a certain line where they start to take us seriously, that's where you want to run for cover. The reason why nobody bothers us so far with releasing some of the data that we do, and this is the mild stuff. They don't really care if we talk about the science, because they figure, well, we can't prove that yet. But when we start talking about the Illuminati and the race lines and all those things, we have an awful lot of data there, and it really ruffles some feathers in high places where there's things like chickens that don't have feathers. And the reason they haven't hassled us is because they need the data. If they do anything to stop us from bringing the information in, they can't access this data because it's out of their frequency range. So they tend to take good care of us. They'll hassle us when they can, but they can't get rid of us. They can't damage us, and they certainly can't stop us, hang up our lives enough where we can't work, because they need the information. So there's a built-in security. You don't have to be scared about learning this information. It might put you on the oddity list, and you'll have little red flags next to your name and on your file that you didn't know you had, that the Secret Service peoples are keeping and stuff like that. But as long as they think you're an Azurite, they figure you're needed, because you guys have the data. There's a whole game that's going on behind the scenes here. The information you'll learn in the Metatronic workshop is, some of it's slightly hair-raising, and it's stuff the government's been trying to hide. Various governments have been trying to hide for quite a while, particularly because it involves a planet called Nibiru and a thing called Wormwood, and the fact that people are trying to build bases on the moon so they can get off here when the mess comes. The government people have been trying to do this and not to tell the public. There's a lot of things you'll learning from the Azurite teachings, but you don't have to be afraid of learning them, because for two things. One, the people that would possibly decide to do you harm would be the ones who most need the information, because they can do stuff. They figure, I can do stuff with it. So they don't bother you. They let you be, as long as you don't, do wild demonstrations and, go out and lobby and stuff and get political about it. You just let them do their thing and mind your business. Another thing is frequency. You can literally, after working with this stuff for a while, put yourself completely out of their frequency where you're completely invisible to them. Even though they have a folder, they can't find you. They might be able to find your folder because it's made out of paper. But if you get really good, you can make that demanifest too. Put it in a Merkaba. I'll take that. Take it to the earth and burn it. Yes, wait. Find out. Okay. Okay. I got an hour and a half. Yeah, that's good. Okay. You just keep. I tend to float away on time and just go on tangents. So Az keeps me grounded enough so I can. Well, we have an hour and a half left before I have to let you guys go for a coffee break and for lunch, really, technically. What I like to do is take a little break in between that and then do lunch. We'll get there. Anyway, Partakai, Partakay, Partakam. We're not going to do full lunch? Okay. We have to be out of here by 6? Oh, okay. 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 Oh, if that's all right with everybody, if they're hungry, I mean, they need to eat. We'll be all right. They'll get what they need. Okay. Anyway, Partakai, Partakay, Partakam. Manu, Ire, Mane, the forces of God. Partakai, yes. Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam. That's not on this chart yet, but we'll get there. It's on the charts. I'm kind of jumping ahead and pulling it back to the front, so by the time you get up there, you'll see where it fit here. Anyway, Partakai, Partakay, Partakam. These units of consciousness, which are little standing light bulbs, little standing scalar waveforms, group by like vibration and like mathematics. They all have an imbued mathematical program, which is the intention of Source. The intention of Source is translated into a mathematical program which forms the idea, the original intention. Source wants to create something. That something becomes a mathematical imprint, and that imprint is what gives the divine blueprint for the thing to come to be. Your thoughts work the same way. We were created in the image of God. Indeed, we were. We are creators. When we think a thought, it becomes a mathematical program. It becomes a divine blueprint, or a non-divine blueprint. It becomes a blueprint for something, and it comes out somewhere. It may not be right where we want it to be, but it emerges someplace. So this process, when we take it into the science, we have Partakai, Partakay, Partakam become what are called Partakai grids. These form, imagine like a fabric made out of light bulbs. Lots of Christmas tree lights. Imagine a blanket of Christmas tree lights. Do you ever see those ones you throw over bushes? Where they're like woven together and they're like a big square of them with the little Christmas tree lights, and they're like a fabric. Well, you can picture Partakai grids as a fabric. It's a scalar wave grid where what used to be just a few of the little scalar wave forms that flash off and on. And the reason they flash off and on, they do this interesting cycle thing. They flash on, hit vibration, oscillation, then they flash off back into the Partakai phase. This is called Partakai phasing. So these 3 stages, they're actually 3 stages of the same waveform. When it's completely off and unified and still, it's not vibrating at all. It's in its Partakai phase and its Manu phase. When it begins its flashing off and on cycle, when it begins to manifest, it first comes on as vibration and then moves from there into oscillation. This is called Partakai phasing. It's like lights completely off, lights getting a little bit on, but they're not quite light yet, they're vibration, and then lights turning on, and then lights going back off again, and cycling through this. Partakai phasing is simply the process of Partakai polarizing and depolarizing, polarizing and depolarizing, which turns still point into vibration and oscillation, and then back into still point. Then vibration and oscillation, back into still point. Partakai phasing. When you look at this with a series of standing waves that do this, of units of consciousness or units of intention that flash on and off like this, it creates what's called a flash line sequence. That's back to the marquee image, where you would have them flashing off and on, and it would create a line of flashes that, what's interesting about scalar waves, they form arcs after a while. If you have them all positioned, right, the lights don't move, but they flash off and on, and energy is released when they hit their oscillation phase. If they're standing close to each other, and they have a certain rhythm of flashing off and on, there's going to be a reaction between those bursts of energy. And what happens are arcs of energy, arcs of light, arcs of like electricity start to happen between the units of standing waves. This is where currents start to come in, currents of frequency, currents of consciousness, where consciousness starts to take on an electromagnetic reality. And that's what the sciences tells us that our universe is built on, electromagnetics. Before electromagnetics, you have these things. You have Partakai, Partake, Particum. They are the units of the consciousness of God that interact in a way, according to their mathematical template that God created, that allows for the creation of electricity, of electromagnetics, of which the hologram is built. So this is actually the pre-domain area. If you were going to create a domain, like a website or something like this, say this is the computer you're going to put it in. All right. This comes first. You go from Partakai, Partake, and Particum into Partakai grids, or scalar wave grids. When you talk about unified field physics, the unified field is the cosmic scalar grid. This whole wave, this whole huge, massive, I'll get to that in a minute, huge, massive area of scalar wave points that link together. They all flash off and on in syncopated rhythms, which means different rhythms, but they all have fixed rhythms, and they're very specific. Now, a dimensional band would be one specific set of rhythms. Another dimensional band would be another specific set of rhythms, and there's a very specific format to how dimensions are structured. Dimension 1 would have, let's say, 12 flashes. Dimension 2 would have the 12 flashes from Dimension 1 plus 12 of its own, so it would have 24. This is a base 12 system. Now, our system was created on a base 12/base 15 pattern, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But it starts here with, if you're going to understand dimensions, it helps to understand Partakai phasing, which is the creation of flash lines, flashing on and off. Dimension is a flash line sequence, a very specific flash line sequence that is part of the framework that the universal and cosmic structure is built in. So everything that comes into that structure has to adopt a part of that flash line sequence in order to get in there. That means your template as an individual, your divine blueprint, would be based upon, first of all, the same divine blueprint that the universe is built on, and that the galaxy is built on, and that the planet's built on. In order for you to get into this reality field as an individual, you would have to take on all of those things first, just to get yourself mathematically into here, and then you would put into that program your own unique mathematical programmings that give you who you are, who you decided you wanted to be, who you, when you were up there being God, decided, I want to be this person, so I'm going to create this pattern. We've all done that. We all are God. And it's not blasphemous to say, I am God. It doesn't mean I'm God, I'm your boss, you listen to me. It means I'm God, and if I'm God, so are you. It means we all should be really nice to each other and stop treating each other like we are anything but the same person. Anyway. Okay. Now, Partakai units form Partakai grids. Partakai grids continue to bring toward them more units. So if you can look at the units of consciousness of God as, imagine you were reading a book and you looked away and looked at the TV, then you looked at the book again. You're directing attention someplace, right? When you were reading the book, your attention is directed to the book. You looked away and your attention's not there anymore. Then you look back here and you gave it more attention. If you can look at how the energy of consciousness gets in here in the first place, you can look at, okay, God decided to focus on this place and decided it wanted to create. But then it thought about something else and looked away. But then it came back here and it was still going to create. It keeps feeding energy in by coming back to the original intention. This is what keeps it fueled. So we have the Partakai, Partake, Particum. They build up to Partakai grids. The Partakai grids build up because God keeps putting his attention back here. God didn't build the thing and then walk away. Didn't decide, okay, that's over there, put it in the closet, I'm going to go do something else. If God took its attention away at all for any length of time from this particular hologram, the hologram would be gone because it's the attention of God that makes the hologram real. We'd all disappear instantly if God decided didn't want to pay any attention anymore because we are the faces of God. So we'd all just disappear and be gone again. We go back to where God wanted to put its attention. There's a lot to learn and a lot of subtleties that you can't even verbalize. I try to verbalize some of them in kind of very strange analogies sometimes because it can carry some of the reality of how these things are. Some of these things you can't describe in linear language. They're things you can feel and cognate through direct cognition, that when you begin to work with opening the inner senses, which comes as a result of working with the Vecca codes and things, you'll progressively be able to feel more of that direct cognition. Now, we get to the point where we have scalar grids. Well, they keep taking more. They accrete or pull toward themselves more of like mathematical patterns, which means God puts its energy back on this particular idea. That idea has the same signature as the idea it had before about the same thing, so it pulls in that idea. That particular pattern pulls in that one. They build up into what's called kilans, which are three-dimensional crystallizations. At this point, there are three different sets of flashline sequences. Now, when you have three different sets of flashline sequences, three-dimensional rhythms, or three flashing on and off rhythms, they begin to form crystallizations of units of light and sound. This is where we begin to get the substance of scalar standing waves, becoming crystallizations of thought. They're thought crystals, God thought crystals, but they're also electromagnetic-based crystals. They are crystallizations of pre-matter that from this point, matter begins to build up and take on form. Okay, could we go to the next left, please? Now, I hope I'm not boring you guys that have been through this before. You guys doing all right? The ones who have been to these workshops before? Okay, anyway. I just want to make sure I get it across to the people who haven't, and I'll get caught up. Anyway. Now, this little diagram here is used to illustrate what's called a 15-dimensional time matrix. And in the early days, 2 years ago, we all thought that there was only this to deal with if we wanted to ascend. Wait till you get through it this afternoon. That's kind of a private joke, but it'll be a group joke by the end of this afternoon. Now, this 15-dimensional time matrix that we have here, you see I have dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then these three areas out here. These are what are called the primal sound fields. All right? These are when Partakai units and Partakai grids in the consciousness of Source is not yet in its oscillation stage. It's still in its sound vibration stage. It's really pre-sound because it's not sound that you can fully hear. You couldn't hear it with your ears. It's not an outside sound. It's the inside sound, the inside song, the universal orchestra that every particle, every cell, everything in manifestation, and even the things that aren't in manifestation, have a core vibration that is their core song. That's why sometimes I'll ask you to, like when we were on the bus, let's sing our soul songs. It means at that moment, and that moment will be different than any other moment, there's a core vibration that is you as God, you and God as one. When you do your soul song, it's saying, let that move through you. Let you know it. Let you feel it. Bring it to the world. It is a gift. This core vibration comes from the primal sound fields, which are the vibration fields. Now, out of the primal sound fields emerge what are called the primal light fields. Dimension 13, 14, and 15 are the primal light fields, and they're called the ki rashe. The words are the externalization, the closest translation and externalization that you can get. They're not just names stuck on. They're the translation of the vibrational and oscillation frequency of those particular energy signatures. So you have ki, ra, she. Those are the translations of the verbal end, the part you can actually objectify. There's a whole bunch more of that sound signature and that light signature that you can't even objectify in a linear three-dimensional framework. But we call it the ki rashe because that is the part of its sound form and its light form that you can verbalize. These sound fields up here are called the kundare. Kundare, ki rashe. These are the primal creation currents, out of which the smaller dimensionalized currents emerge. Okay? Now, here, D12. D12 is the area where, up here, we have primal light fields. When we think about light, we're thinking about scalar waves that are in their on position. They don't go off. They're just staying on. This creates a form of substance called antimatter, which is gaseous light. It would be gas light, like how they see the light-colored gases around like stars and things out in the universe with the Hubble space thing. They see all these colored clouds of gaseous light, kind of like that. It's called thermoplasm. It's a type of stuff. That word I don't think our scientists have yet, thermoplasm. But that's what it's called, the founders call it. They call it thermoplasm. So this is a thermoplasmic light field, which is heat light, consciousness as heat light. It is also, if we remember, and it's good to remember this from the beginning, we're talking about consciousness here the whole time. We started out with the man-out consciousness, the ire consciousness, and the man-a consciousness. And from there, it moves itself into Partikai, Partike, Particum structure, which are units of consciousness. Consciousness implies identity. Consciousness implies it's a who, not an it. It's a being, not just a thing. It implies that all things are beings. It implies that when we're dealing with the primal sound fields and the primal light fields, we're dealing with who are they, not just what are they. When we deal with the concept of, okay, we're way down here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3, that's where our consciousness is stationed right now, where we know ourselves as being. To get down here, from up here, we had to come through here. We left a piece of ourselves at each step of the way. The who is directly a part of us. There's a part of us that lives and its consciousness is stationed in the primal light fields, in the primal sound fields, in what area this is called here is the divine blueprint. The 10, 11, and 12, and particularly 12, is referred to as the divine blueprint. That is a point where the gaseous light begins to take on a bit of solidity. It slows down a bit, and there gets to be oscillation and vibration mixed together again, where here you had just vibration, here you had just oscillation. Here they begin to mix and combine, which means they can interact with each other and give the illusion of movement. The divine blueprint, the 10, 11, and 12, is called pre-matter density. It's liquid light, and it's very hard to describe. I've seen what this looked like actually my eyes have seen what it looks like, and you can think of liquid mercury, perhaps, the silver liquid mercury, but it's much lighter. It doesn't have that same kind of heavy metal quality. It's just absolutely beautiful, and it's a who, and you can feel it when you see that kind of light and that energy. This is the Christos they talk about. I've never seen there too. So all these cells are running around, and they're all fed by the same frequencies, the same primal life force currents coming down through. They experience linear momentum through time, following a set of fluctuations that are characteristic of coordinates. But honestly, they're all going on at the same time. The process of means opening his body. It means bringing all that consciousness into one body. It means all the other bodies running around in their holograms, progressively, they will have their end time, whatever their end time is, and it's all synchronized. Like the one body that held the highest coding in the DNA will be the body that the whole identity chose to be its ascension body. That will be the body it's planning to take everybody out with, right? And that one being will know itself as a being who had many other lives. And in this time cycle, it's all synchronized with race time cycles and planetary time cycles. We're at a time cycle when the bodies that are on the planet right now are the ones that were the high-coded ones, that were to take the rest from the previous cycle out. So we're the ones that have the potentialities for ascension. And that would simply mean opening up these bodies to themselves. Easier said than done, but not that hard and not impossible. Okay. So Antakarana, Kundalini. Keywords, just so you know, so you have an idea of what currents you're running. There are also more specific names, and we get really specific when we get into the Mano, the Ire, and the Mane breaking down into currents. But it starts with understanding them. Question. As the primal sound fields, Kundare, primal light fields, Kirashe, primal Christos fields, pre-matter liquid light, Christos fields, divine blueprint, the Maharata frequency. Then the Antakarana, the 9 through 1, which are universal Kundalini currents. These are the base currents that make up your existence, that make up your life field, that bring your consciousness continually into body so it knows itself as being here, and it doesn't wake up like as one person one day and another person another day and forgot the one it was before. There's a whole mathematical organization, a divine dance that goes on with the consciousness and with the body within this incredible divine blueprint that Source created, and that we as Source, when we were at one with Source, which we still are, agreed to use as a manifestation platform. We're in a hologram that exists within Source. You can't be away from God. You can't be separated from God. You can only think you are. You can only experience your reality as if you were, which can seem pretty darn real, but it still isn't, because there is nowhere outside of Source to go, because it is all existing within God and within Source. This is the basic structure of understanding that process. When we get into these, in Cathara healing, we talk about something called triadic phase currents. That's further breaking down these currents to understanding them specifically. Because if you're going to be a healer, let's say, you want to know what currents you're running for what applications. So it helps to have labels to call those. All right? These currents here, remember the names of the shields? We had the telluric shield, dimension 1, 2, and 3. So these are the telluric currents. You'd have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Right? This would be the Daretic shield, the soul shield. Daretic phase 1, 2, 3. There's the Daretic currents. These would be the Turic, T-E-U-R-I-C, the oversoul currents. 1, 2, and 3. 3. Up there. And these would be the Maharic currents, D10, 11, and 12, phase 1, 2, and 3. So it's a very simple system, but it's also very elegant. There's a lot of detail to this system. And these get broken down further into myons, dions, and all sorts of words I can never remember. That's why I did the chart for all of us that goes at the end. Because these further break down to understanding which parts of the primal force which current carries. As far as, is it Ire-based, is it Manau-based, is it Mane-based? When you look at them as aspects of the direct living God consciousness, one is more masculine, you could say, the Mane. One is more feminine, the vibration, the Ire. And one is the union current, which is the Manu. That's the whole one, out of which the other two come out of. So it's interesting to see how those currents come down, how those forces of consciousness come down into the primal currents and become part of us. It even goes into the atomic level. In this course, we learn about how these forces literally form inside and around every atom in our bodies. And we also find out about something called the neutron window, which is a natural thing that's supposed to be there that allows the currents, the natural Manu currents, to flow through. And it gives us the ability to be able to shift, by thought, the angular rotation of particle spin. That means every particle in your body has a specific axis, like the Earth has an axis that it rotates on. Now, a time zone is a flashline sequence in which the axes of particles are in a specific alignment. If you want to get from this time zone to another one that has a different axis, you need to be able to shift the molecules and the atoms in your body, their axis, from this timeline's axis to the other one you want to go to. Now there's a thing in atoms called the neutron window that, working with Merkaba and working with the primal currents in the right way, is supposed to allow the axis of our particles and our atoms to shift. But right now we have a mutation that blocks the neutron window, which blocks the DNA and the chemicals that would naturally allow the body to go through this change. So we are phase-locked or stuck in one time vector, in one timeline. When we're working with ascension, what we are doing is bringing back the potentiality of the body to begin to open the neutron windows, to begin to let all the natural sequence of the primal life force currents flow, so we can begin, again, to reclaim the ability to shift our angular rotation of particle spin, which means build our Merkaba vehicle, which means be able to point that Merkaba vehicle wherever we'd like it to go and leave. And then if we want to, come back and teach other people how to do it. Okay, next one. How am I doing? Okay. Okay. I'll do that real quick. Yeah, I'll do that one real quick. Okay. Now, within the human body, we have those first Antankarana currents, dimension 1 through 9. The slow evolution process is the process of progressively going through. It used to be one long lifetime where you just build up those frequencies in the body until you had full 9-dimensional. Then you'd work on the Maharata current and bring up to D12, 12-dimensional consciousness. When you get to the point where you've fully integrated D12, or the 12 subharmonics of 12 dimensions, 12 flashline sequences running in your body, at that point, you're an avatar, an embodied avatar. Well, you already are an embodied avatar. You're an avatar, but not quite embodied. You're here, body's here, and you're kind of stuck in between. Well, when you become fully activated on a 12-strand pattern, this isn't even talking about indigo patterns. This is just a simple 12-strand angelic human pattern. And you begin to activate the subharmonics of the primal light fields. You might not have DNA strands 13, 14, and 15, but there are things called seals within the DNA that will hold those frequencies. What that does, when you have D13, 14, and 15 begins to activate after your full D12 pattern is activated, it begins a process of flashing this pattern on. And it's not like it runs down like water. It actually flashes on like a whole image, as if these currents just flashed on and then they flashed off again. when you get to the point where you can hold them and they stay on, you can demanifest at will. These are the Key-Riche currents. Remember D13, 14, and 15? After you hit the D12 Divine Blueprint, you had the primal light fields. Well, this is how the primal light fields come into the Kathara grid in the body. Now, the Kathara grid in the body fits into the body like this. You have Kathara Center 1 is down in Earth's core. Kathara Center 2 is up in through this area. It's in the prostrate for males, and it's in the vagina area for females, probably the G-spot. I heard about that in a book once, but I didn't read the book, so I don't know much about it. Then you have 3 and 4, which they have different names to them, too. They're not that important. It's just more words you really don't need to know, but they're there in case you want the detail. Okay. They're in the ovaries of females, and the ureters, I can't pronounce those, ureters in males. They're in here. Number 5. Is it the navel? Now remember, these go with these. Remember, these are the areas that hold the programs for DNA strand 5 template would be held there, right? That's the dimension 5 connection. Dimension 1 is actually down in Earth's core. So these all correspond, and these are centers right in your body. This helps in healing. Kathara healing is about learning to work with these centers, with the body, to reprogram where they need to be reprogrammed. And eventually, when we get time and we're not on like Plan B and trying to get ourselves caught up with ourselves, there's a lot of fun one can have with manifesting, as far as you can learn how to create and manifest through each of the Kathara centers and those kind of things too, and place it in different time zones and in the one you want it to and those kind of things. We haven't had time to get that course down off the CDD plates, but it's there. So it helps to know where your Kathara centers are. You have 6 and 7 are here and here. 8 is here. 9 and 10 are here. They're in the brain, really, behind the ears. Back in here in the brain. 11 is in the pineal, at the center of the brain. And 12, it's called the capstone, is in the 10th chakra, which is 6 inches above the head. And it's interesting because you have like a chakra lineup that goes one way, right? And the numbers still correspond with each other, but the placements don't always. So you have one chart that's the chakra chart, and another chart that's this. If you notice, like, Kathara Center 12 is in chakra 10, and you'll also notice on the chakra charts that chakra 12 is down below the feet. So, where am I? Where am I? So their systems are interconnected, but the placements of them are sometimes, different. Like chakras and Kathara centers aren't in the same place, but they are connected and running the same frequency. Even if 12 is down here in chakras and 12 is up there, there's still a connection between those two that they're running frequency together. So this configuration here is when the Key-Riche light fields begin to enter the body. This is the pattern they'll enter through. Now, D13 is called the blue flame, okay? The Akkadic blue flame. That's the first individuation from source. That's the light field. It's the first individuated light field from source. It connects to the Akkadic level sound field, which is the first sound field individuation from source. D13 is actually a pale turquoise in color, but they call it the blue flame. And it comes down through the Kathara grid, through this path, through from 12 through 9 through 6, crosses over through 5, 4, 2, and 1. Now, it didn't always do that. Right now, there's a certain configuration that was used for seeding 3 in the angelic human races that was done to sidestep distortions in the planetary grids that were manifesting within the bodies as well. That's why you don't see a direct crossover up here, where normally, if this planetary system was functioning the right way, you would have the natural, almost like that, the DNA configuration as we see the DNA chains. You would see them swapping, all braiding all the way down. But right now, the configuration that everything in this system, and this, not just this planetary system, but this galactic system, follows this pattern. And it's called, they call the passage itself, if you look at it as stargates, because you can look at these as stargates too on a larger level, it's called the Ark of the Covenant. This was the original Ark of the Covenant that ran from Stargate 9, or actually Stargate 12, Lyra Aramatena, down through Stargate 9, Andromeda, and down through this way, through Sirius B, through Tara, and through our sun, and down into the Earth system. So this inner thing, this inner Kathara grid, the Earth also has one. The galaxy also has one. On the Earth level and the galactic level, the universal level, these are stargates. These centers are stargates. In the body, they're the interior stargates, and they hold the programs of manifestation for literally the templates of matter in each density level. So we have the Kathara centers there, and sometimes when we're running technique, will be asked to do something with a certain Kathara center. So it's important to know that you have them and basically at least have the diagram around so you can dig it out and figure out where that was. I don't say you have to memorize them all. It doesn't hurt, and after a while it's easy. You know your basic 15 chakras and you know your basic Kathara centers. Now over here on the other side of this, you have what's called the violet flame. It's actually a pale magenta. It's the D15 current. It's a higher frequency, but it's actually the third step away from source as opposed to the first, because there you have to go all the way up in frequency and then contract again to get back down into at one minute with source. So that's a simple way to describe that. But D13 is actually, in terms of closer to source, D13 is closer. But in terms of resonance of frequency, how fast it flashes, D15 is faster. But it's an expansion point, and at that point, things have to contract and go back down to get out of the time matrix. They have to go back down through D13 current. But anyway, we have the basic. If you see this, there are some mystical teachings out there that use this configuration, sometimes without the Kathara grid in it. They'll just show you the three flames and say that's important. They usually don't tell you too much why, but it's usually something about Christ. Those teachings tend to give you something about Christ, but they don't teach you a whole lot about what the dynamics are here. Down the middle, you have what's called the gold flame. It's a pale yellow flame. It's the D14 frequency. So when you get D12 activated, or even when you begin to activate D12 subharmonics, which is what we do with the exercises, you can't just turn on D12 like a light switch because you blow your body up. So what happens when we work with the Maharic seal and all of those techniques, we're progressively building D12 subharmonics, which means you have three strands, obviously, because we can see you when you're a three-dimensional being. So you have three strands activated. That means we're teaching you first to activate 12 subharmonics, 12 sub-frequency bands in each of those three strands. The next one will be strand 4, 12 sub-frequency bands. That's how it builds. Now, when you get to the point where you've built 12 sub-frequency bands in 12 strands of DNA, that's 144, right, sub-frequency bands. That is at the point in time when this would start really flashing on in your body and holding. But you can get subharmonic activation of this too. And when we run the Kundalini activation sequence, the Kirisha activation sequence, it is bringing really short nanosecond bursts of these frequencies into your body. And that amplifies the rest of your D12 activation, of your 12-strand activation. It amplifies the rest of that. So I just wanted you to, some of these are actually, the symbols themselves, the drawings themselves are symbols. And if you study them sometimes, just look at them. Let them talk to you. They will, just like a symbol code will. These are coded drawings where they have huge amounts of data. And if you, by absorbing them, optical pineal, these would be interesting to look at with crossed eyes, which we'll get into later as far as optical pineal induction and why we need to cross our eyes to blend the currents to see the whole mathematical pattern clearly and absorb it. These diagrams will work for that as well, and you can pick up huge amounts of direct cognition information by playing with the diagrams. There's a reason why we put ourselves through a lot to get these dumb diagrams out. The amount of time it takes is ridiculous to make these. It really is sometimes to put these together, because most of them are paste ups. Hand done, cut them out with an X-Acto knife, stick up the little numbers, that kind of thing. But if you use these, you can gain a huge amount of information off of them just by saying, okay, brain, let's do direct cognition, and playing with your eye focus when you're looking at them, and just seeing what frequencies come off them at whatever eye position. There's 12 different places you can cross your eyes to. And each one will pick up a different set of frequencies from whatever you're looking at. A full master knows how to master each one of those eye focuses. We got about 1.5, right? No, we've been playing with it. It's not something we teach you have to do. But there are some amazing things that you're walking around with some really neat toys right now, like your eyeballs. There's really neat things you can do with your eyes that you didn't realize you could because nobody taught you you could. There are 12 different distinct focuses that will give you 12 different reads on what's happening in this world. Some will bring in higher frequency. Some will show you lower frequency spectra. Some will help you to literally shift out of here. So we work with certain ones of those when we get into the Vecca codes. We work with moving the eye muscles into different focuses. Anyway, some of them aren't typeset, but they should be legible, and I think that it's the drawings on them that are most important, because they really conceptualize large amounts of data into one space. So, they're quick reference, and they also work as symbol codes. Anyway, we're going to go from the recap we did on all sorts of things like Cathar grids and the primal life force currents and 15-dimensional time matrices and all of those things. And we're going to go from there into a brief exploration of what are called the 15 rays and 12 domains of the 7 higher and 7 lower heavens. Now, this is where it starts, not where it ends. Everybody thinks it's kind of funny, like our religions teach us that, oh, you know, if we're really good and we follow the Bible, we'll die and then, like, we'll go to heaven, as if there's one. The heavens are the smaller spaces that exist within the God worlds. So the heavens are only the first stop. And when we get into Dance for Love, we'll begin to understand where the words Veka and Eka and Akasha and Akasha A and Akasha Ea fit. Because these are names that are associated with the God worlds, whereas the word Veka itself refers to the 7 higher and lower heavens, or sets of 7 higher and lower heavens. So when we talk about the 7 higher and lower heavens, these aren't the end, or the end of the journey. These are actually the beginning for us. We're part of one of the 7 lower heavens right now. Okay? Now, in terms of the primary life force currents that we've talked about the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane currents. These currents break themselves down, or Source breaks them down. They're broken down according to the mathematical patterning that set the original scalar template, the cosmic divine blueprint, has the mathematics that cause consciousness to break itself down into these specific types of rays or frequencies. Before we get to rays, we have what are called the domains. The domains, now I had talked about the Cathara grid, and remember I said we had the number 1 on the bottom through 12, and then there's another Cathara grid that goes from D13, 14, and 15, and then up through the primal sound fields. So you would have the second Cathara grid would have D13, 14, and 15 primal light fields. That would be their equivalent of density 1 in that Cathara grid. Then you have the triadic level of the sound matrix. You'd have triadic level 1, 2, and 3. Then you'd have polaric level 1, 2, and 3, and akkadic level 1, 2, and 3. So you get another 12 set of points in the second Cathara grid. When we're dealing with the 15 rays and 12 domains, we don't get into rays until we begin to get into D15, 14, and 13. So the sound fields, those primal sound fields that would occupy the coming downward, the first 9 of the Cathara centers on the second Cathara grid, but coming downward toward us. All right, they would be considered the domains because they're different than regular dimensional structure. They're like a pre-dimensional structure. They're the sound fields, they're vibration fields, so they're not flashing on and off like standing scalar waves that form light and then go back to sound, form light and go back to sound. They're like a standing sound field or a standing vibration field. So it would be like standing dark field, and then you go into D13, 14, and 15, and you have standing light field where they don't shut off. So you have the sound fields are the vibrational fields, and the light fields are the oscillation fields. One has light bulbs off and the other has light bulbs on, and they stay that way. And when we get into dimensionalization, or what we call dimensionalization, that's where we get the effect of what appears to be movement, or a pattern that consciousness can follow, a pattern of flash and on and off lines that consciousness can follow, that'll give it linear time progression. So when you're up into the higher fields of the primal sound fields and even the primal light fields, you don't experience linear perception in the same way you do in dimensionalization. Dimensionalization is built on a ratio between flashing on and off, where those other two fields, one is completely off and one is completely on. So one is completely vibration, and it's a contraction point, and the other is complete oscillation, which is an expansion point. So they are like states of consciousness that are very expansive, but you don't have biology as far as a shaped biology in relation to that. You're like a consciousness cloud at that point. In the primal light fields, in D13, 14, and 15, that's the antimatter state of gaseous thermoplasmic frequency. It's not pre-matter yet. In that state, if your consciousness was there, you would be heat light radiation. Your form would be heat light radiation. So if you were to go from here up to that level, you would turn your matter body into thermoplasm, gaseous heat light radiation. That would be your shape. If you were to look in a mirror, that's what you would look like. And what's interesting is, because time is simultaneous, and you have parts of yourself that are up there, and they always have been up there, as long as you're down here, those parts are still up there. You have a part of you that exists in the form of thermoplasm, and that's the part that's in D13, 14, and 15. D13, 14, and 15 is an interesting place, because there's, in that space, D13 begins the formation of the pulsations that will become the flashline sequences of dimensionalization from 12 on down. So the 13, 14, and 15 count as both domains, which are stationary and fixed, let's say, instead of moving, forming arcs, forming flashlines. But they also qualify as rays, because they begin the process of, it's like before it goes into flashing on and off. There's a little bit of it there. It begins to break down the standing fields into a little bit of movement fields. So they are considered, the 13, 14, and 15 are considered domains, and they are also considered rays. They are the top 3 of the 15 rays. Now, the rays are interesting because there's a lot of Anunnaki teachings out there that talk about the 7 rays. And the 7 rays, they're talking about the primal life force currents too, but they're capping it off. If you think of a Cathara grid, they're capping it off at the 7th Cathara center, because that's where their universe, where they've literally cut their universe off. They're trying to build their universe to a higher level. They're trying to build it into what's called a D11.5 reverse matrix, which is a very high-level anti-Christos reverse matrix. We'll talk more about that in the Metatronic workshop. But for this workshop, to understand the rays and the domains can be understood as more fixed and stationary, where movement and linear progression doesn't exist in the way we know it in the hologram down here. And the 15 rays below them, they correspond to the primal light fields, and then down through dimensionalization. Now, they all start with the Manau, the Mane, and the Ire. So each one of these breaks itself down. Each one of these 3 primal, the Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam, original units, okay, original scalar fields that are holding the Mane, the Manau, and the Ire, they break themselves down to become first the 12 domains, which you have the Akkadic level 3. Now each one, see, they have a little set of letters after each one of them. They are, again, the primary audible sound translation of the vibration and/or oscillation of that particular set of waves, of standing waves. So at the Akkadic level, which would be the first individuation of sound fields from source, you'd have Akkadic 3, and that's called the sound tone audibly, would be Re. Akkadic 2 coming down is the E sound, and Akkadic 1 is the Ra sound. You put them together, you get Re. See how 1 and 2 go together to make 3, okay, as far as the fields up there. This is understanding that each of the domains and the rays have an audible translation of their vibration or oscillation is important, because these are what we're using when we begin to use the sacred songs. We are using very specific combinations of sound tones that are built upon very intricate, some of them, mathematical combinations of these ray vibrations or domain vibrations. So when we use the words we were learning with the magic, the magic words that we've been singing, they are specifically calling upon the frequencies, the sound tones, that go with, one is for the Manau, one is for the Mane, and one is for the Ire in that particular exercise that we've been doing for the last couple of days. That one's on page 16, the magic words of co-creation, where you have the 4 songs. You have, like, song 2 is the Ire Shara Dike She Ta'amira Pranachi, that one. That goes with the Ire currents. What we're taking are the currents that go, that build down. If you they step down. It's called a step-down creation. The Ire breaks itself down into 3 specific rays, and I believe the Ire goes with the ones, the Akkadic 1, Polaric 1. Yeah, wait a minute, let me see. I had this one figured out before, but then I lost it on this graph. I have another graph that shows this better. In fact, the graph that we just gave you this morning, this one is why I wanted to have it for originally. It's your last page so far, I think, in what you have there. That would be page 59. Could we put that one up, honey? Could we put that graph up, please? Okay, it's the new one that we just handed out. This shows it more clearly in terms of the two Cathara grids, where these frequencies and their sound tones and things fit. This actually be a good place to put it if you want to stick it someplace besides at the end. You can put it by the 15 rays and 12 domains and 7 higher and lower heavens place. Anyway, while we're waiting for that. Anyway, each one of these areas, notice they go in threes. So in the first breakdown over here, with the akkadic levels, the first breakdowns, one would be the expression of the primarily Manu, one would be primarily Mane, and one would be primarily Ire. All right, that goes all the way down. So like the polaric level would have an expression of each, Mane, Mano, and Ire. This pattern comes down all the way down through them. Yeah, kind of like keep them over, kind of probably move them side by side. Here on this graph, we can see them a little better as far as I also put like the crossbar names in, which means the areas where these two energies flow together, they form a different sound, right? This wasn't in the original Dance for Life thing, but this is like taking it one step further. You have your basic, there's your first 24 Cathara centers, and then there's your 12 dimensional ones. They link here. This would be D13, that's D12. Now, this is called, over here, it's called the Biveka point, which means two vector point. Biveka point links D12 into D13. Triveka point links D13 into D14 and the rest of the primal sound fields. There are two codes that we use, the Biveka and the Triveka, that open the seals that hold those levels of frequency separate from each other. So this is the beginning of understanding when we're using Veka codes, what do? They open what are usually closed seals that are called locks between the different frequency bands. Now, as far as the 7 higher and lower heavens go, it's an interesting way. This had me like slightly dyslexic when it was first coming. Where do we get 7? Where is this? Because we have 15 dimensions. Okay, we're based on